Good evening, everybody. Thanks for your patience. We just dealt with a little glitch getting the Zoom up and running, but we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so the first thing we always do, of course, is approve our agenda. As we look at the agenda tonight, does anyone have any changes or deletions that you know of?
Give me just one sec. No.
Okay. So next is public comment. And I know that I've personally heard from at least a few people who are intending to speak this evening for public comment. I would like to, if it's possible, because I can see in the room and online we have a number of sort of larger number of people joining us than typical. Can we please just get a sense of how many people are hoping to participate in public comment? If you're here in the room, you raise your hand. Okay. If you're online, can you use the raise hand function, please? Okay, so I see one person online and a number of people in the room. All right, what I would like to do, I'm just going to say up front, is I know that some of the people who've reached out to me, I believe are coming to speak on the topic of the calendar. And tonight is going to be the sort of time when we have to make a decision and move forward on the calendar. We had previously committed in December to, at that point, we invited folks to come to public comment, and we had said we would hear people who wanted to come and share a viewpoint on the calendar, even if it went beyond the time allotted, which is typically 15 minutes total for public comment for 3 minutes apiece. I don't know of everybody who's intending to speak, how many people are hoping to speak to the calendar issue. I do know that I was contacted by a pair of students who are hoping to speak together for a total of 6 minutes as 2 people. I also had been in contact with Rabbi Benjamin and had agreed ahead of time at my discretion to allow him up to 6 minutes to speak, just out of respect for his position and his engagement throughout this process. So my question for us here is, what is, knowing that we have a lot to get to, and particularly our budget, of course, is an important topic. We can just kind of start with the folks who reached out ahead of time, and then go from there. I would also entertain a motion to extend our public comment for tonight, at least to ensure that everyone hoping to speak on the calendar is able to be heard, because this really is sort of the last chance.
Mm-hmm. I move to extend public comment so we can hear from everyone that is present and wants to share their views.
Okay.
I'll second it. For discussion, do we need a time? Do we need to define what we're extending it to?
I think typically, I'm pretty sure within, it could be like another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Would be that's what I would
I think you can set it.
extend it to. So I would.
You can set the extension period.
Yeah, and I think just judging from the temperature check of those who are here, I think if we extended it for up to no more than 30 minutes, that should suffice for the people who are here. And of course, individuals are always, per our policy, welcome to speak for up to 3 minutes. given this, I am going to just tell everyone ahead, I'm gonna set my clock timer. I'm sorry, that's rude. I think it's easier than me trying to politely interject for you to wrap up. And of course, you can speak for less than 3 minutes. That's also always fine. For folks, so actually we have a motion and seconded. All in favor of that motion to extend public comment up to 30 minutes total? Okay, that's approved. And so just a reminder before we get started, if you're new to speaking at public comment, please come up, introduce yourself, and state your address for the record. And then we welcome this opportunity to hear perspectives of members of our community. We do not respond directly to individuals who share perspectives in public comment. If what you're speaking about is something on our agenda that we are going to be discussing during this meeting, there is an opportunity for members, if they want to respond to points or questions that have been raised in the context of the discussion on our agenda, and that's a way that we are complying with open meeting law while maintaining public comment. And so with that, is anybody hoping to go first? If so, great. Thank you. Come on up. Okay. Let me just, sorry. Okay. Great. Can you go ahead and introduce yourselves? Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, I'm Maxine Lorange-Milt. I live on 4 Fairfax Road. I'm currently a senior at Milton High School, and it's my 13th year in Milton Public Schools. And I work at the Glover ASE program.
My name is Brady Sturdivant. I'm also a senior at Milton High School. My address is 38 Norman Street. And this is my 12th year at Milton Public Schools, and I play varsity baseball.
Both Brady and I have taken many AP and honors classes throughout high school, and probably have very few, 10 unexcused absences between the two of us. And through this, we really understand the significance of missing just one day of school. In my freshman year, Rosh Hashanah landed on the 3rd day of school, and I decided to go to synagogue to celebrate the New Year. Unfortunately, my bio teacher had a very important lecture that day that kind of caused me to fail the first quiz of the year.
Even though teachers aren't supposed to give homework on holidays, on Rosh Hashanah, my sophomore year, my chemistry class, I missed school to go to services, and she had given homework that day, and we had a big test the next day. So instead of focusing on being present in synagogue, I was worried about failing my chem test the next day. We aren't asking for Rosh Hashanah off. But the idea of missing both days of school within 10 days roughly of each other is really daunting, especially because Yom Kippur is a more serious holiday that involves fasting and reflecting on your actions for the past year.
In witnessing just kind of all these discussions, we wonder really well whether the opinions of a lot of MPS staff, especially in the high school, were taken into consideration when deciding the school calendar, because after speaking with many teachers, I don't speak for the teachers, but we wonder whether their opinions and beliefs about what best benefits the students was really taken into account, as we do believe truly, like, those missed days in high school are, like, the most impactful. So I do encourage you to, like, maybe talk with the teachers and definitely talk with the teachers union.
Because I know personally that one day of missed BC Calc is definitely going to set you back the entire unit. It's just, we kind of feel that it's pressuring Jewish students and staff in Milton Public Schools to pick between their education, their jobs, and like sports and clubs for their faith.
And I know that I recognize the importance of really referencing the other school districts and like creating the calendar, but I also think it's just as important to create like our own path forward, whether that in taking into account the very unique diversity of Milton and not just saying, oh, Newton has all the Newton uses all the holidays, Brookline has none, and all that. I think I just think taking Yom Kippur off the calendar is just quite unreasonable to a lot of Jewish students, and we don't want to go back 30 years. And I just want you to take into consideration all that we've said. Sorry.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi all, my name is Casey Corcoran. I live at 95 Granite Place over in East Milton, right by Crane Field. So I'm also a member of the congregation, and my students also, my children, students, and a former teacher also have similar concerns about the holidays. But I'm actually here tonight to talk about the executive order that came out banning all transgender athletes from participating in sports. It has to do with Title IX, which is an area of work for me. They talk about it most often at the collegiate level, but Title IX, as probably most folks know here, runs the full K to campus gamut. This executive order is probably not legal, but they're looking for schools to comply in advance. That is the goal. This is another step in the attempted erasure of LGBTQ students. This is not about sports. I believe Milton Public Schools needs to come out and say loudly that we support our trans athletes, our LGBTQ athletes, all of our athletes, but particularly our LGBTQ athletes, and that we will defend their right to participate in school and athletics fully and as part of our community, valued members of our community. And Title IX currently does offer these protections. Again, it is most likely about complying in advance. It takes a long time to change those Title IX regulations. There are real risks for our district in not complying with the executive order. They've already threatened lawsuits. But this is a time for us to stand up for all of our students and say it loudly and clearly that we will protect their rights, their full rights as full members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. I'm Rabbi Benjamin. I live at 29 Winthrop Street here in Milton. So now it's time for some real honesty and complete transparency. As my father of blessed memory would say, oftentimes there is a reason people give, and then there's the real reason. The real reason here is an intrinsic bias and privilege. People who are part of the majority. They're comfortable, they're cozy, part of Milton's dominant culture, and that feels good, convenient, and easy, because it is. It is. What we are dealing with here is like a person when they walk into a home that has an unpleasant smell, but the people who live there have no clue. Only an outsider smells it. And let me assure you that what the four of you intend to do smells really bad. Even more, it's a lie. Time and time again, you have said that your goal is to remove all cultural and religious holidays as days off from the school calendar, to only keep national and state holidays. And yet, you have protected December 24th, Christmas Eve day, as a day off. You have taken advantage of your privilege, your majority culture status, to gerrymander, to rig the calendar in your favor. And it stinks. Let's take a little 3-question honesty transparency survey. Mrs. Chihuahua, I know you have said that you take data seriously. I will keep track of the data with this chart, and then I'll give it to you. Now, I know that citizen speak is not the time for any back and forth conversation, but if you want, you are permitted to answer questions. Let's see what you decide. Here are 3 yes or no questions. Some people are visual learners, so you have a handout. Question number 1. Does having December 24th as a day off from school help you experience Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in the way that is meaningful to you? Question number 2, yes or no? Would you advocate that winter break begin on December 25th and extend past January 1st as long as the same number of days of school are off? And question number 3, again, yes or no? Would you like to see 2 days off per school calendar year that honor Milton's minority religions and cultures? So I think this is going to go pretty fast. Start with you, Chairperson Carroll. Question number 1, yes or no?
We're not going to be able to engage in the back and forth now, but I think if members want to respond to this when we have the discussion on the calendar, we can do that.
Okay. My guess is that for question number 1, the answer is yes. Having December 24th off is a benefit to you personally. Would you advocate for winter break to begin on the 25th? No, you wouldn't. It would take away from something that you want. That's something that matters to you. And finally, for the 3rd, well, we know where people stand. So if the 4 of you go ahead with your proposal to remove all minority holidays, but keep December 24th, which, let's remind everyone, is not a national or state holiday, you will be using the power of your dominant culture majority to dominate all others. As you, school committee member Serio, mentioned a few meetings ago, it will be the tyranny of the majority. The point of the Milton Interfaith Clergy's proposal to designate 2 school days per year to lift up and honor Milton's diverse communities is not about satisfying people's cultural or religious needs or observances. That it's not possible or practical. You're right about that. It's not about them. It's about you. You, the people who were elected to represent our town and the values you want our town to reflect. What you do here will have a significant impact on Milton's reputation. Right now, we have town leaders who have stubbornly refused to find a realistic solution to the MBTA multifamily zoning requirement. Other leaders who continue to stall the building of 35 affordable housing units on the Governor Stoughton property. And now this, erasing all holidays from the school calendar, except, of course, the one that matters most to you, will bring a trifecta of shame on our town. You can do it. No one denies you have the power to make that happen. This is a turning point in the road for our town's reputation. What you, our representatives, choose to say about ourselves and what others will say about us. You can complete this trifecta of callous disregard toward those who, in one way or another, are not part of the in crowd. Or you can stop it in its tracks by lifting up and embracing generosity of spirit, compassion, concern, and kindness. You have that power too. In my tradition, a connection is made between smell and reputation. After all, sweet or sour, we smell things before we get close enough to see them. Do what you want. Milton's reputation as a community that values belonging or belittling, diversity or denigration, it's yours to decide.
Thank you. Maybe, is the person online still interested to participate? If so, can you raise your hand again, please? If not, we can come back to you. Okay, we'll come back. Next person in the room that would like to step forward. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jill Clark. I live at 26 Harold Street. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 4, and I'm a member of the Pierce Site Council. Professionally, I'm a public health professional and work with a number of adolescent health programs and several programs promoting behavioral health access to for students in schools. I want to speak to the school budget, which I know you'll be discussing later this evening, and just tell a small story that I think is representative of things that are happening all across the school budget. Last year, Pierce requested an additional half an FTE of a school adjustment counselor, and they didn't get it. There wasn't money for it, and so that additional half position wasn't filled. This year, it's not even on the request because we're looking at a level service request. That position isn't there, and in order to have level services, we're just keeping the positions that we have and trying to maintain. And that request from last year continues to go unfulfilled, but it doesn't mean that it isn't needed. And in fact, the 2.5 FTEs of school adjustment counselors that we have at Pierce are well under the ratio that the National Association of School Social Workers recommends for a school as large as Pierce. So here we are looking at a level services budget that doesn't even get us to what we really need to serve our students in the way that we would like to see them served. And so I want to thank you all for the work that you've done to put together a school service budget, a school level service budget that will do our best for our students. But want to really emphasize that if we are not able to get that level services budget, that is just the barest of floors. And the needs go far beyond that, and something below a level services budget would be devastating to our schools. And so I really thank you for the work that you've done to get to that point, and really hope that we will see that level service budget recommendation come out of the school committee and be supported at all other levels of town government. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, my name is Christine Turnier. I live at 16 Parkway Crescent, and I am a town meeting member, and I have 2 children who are in the Milton Public School system. I brought this sign because I have forced them to stand out in front of select board meetings holding this sign, and I wanted to bring them here in any little way I possibly could, because ultimately the school system is about my kids, it's about your kids, it's about all of our kids, and it's way past their bedtime. My daughter specifically asked if she could come, and I said no, she had to do her homework. So I just wanted to come here and say that I support the school committee and the work that you're doing to achieve level funding for our schools. I think that as you know, we need adequate funding in our schools. I'm not talking about extravagant funding, which I know there's always a lot of discussion around, surgical audits of our budgets. But the truth is, there's so much more we could do. What we really need is level funding at this point in time. I think it's important that all of our children have access to quality education. And there's a lot that we could do in order to achieve that. And I know that they all deserve this. This isn't the first time that we have had tough discussions about our budgets. I'm pretty sure we will have them again. But it's really important for us to even just maintain what we have, because it's already clear that there's such robust need across all of the school systems. I want to thank you so much for everything you do to fight for our kids, and to fight for our teachers and everything that they need and they deserve. They deserve so much more. I was sort of joking that I would, like, if possible, I would shower them with furs and diamonds for everything that they're able to do on the shoestring budgets that we already give them. There was a comment made earlier about the ceiling and how the ceiling is high in terms of what we ask of our teachers, but our budgets keep getting cut lower and lower. And so everything that you do to fight for our teachers and to fight for our kids is very appreciated by those of us in town. I also wanted to thank you for the transparency that this committee has tried to give, because that can be a really tough thing in this day and age, because if we don't have the information we need to support you and to support our schools, there's a lot of misinformation that gets put out by a lot of folks about what our budgets are used for. So thank you so much for everything you do. On behalf of my children who can't be here to hold their signs, thank you for everything that you are doing for our schools. And if there's any way we could possibly do more, you absolutely have my support and my kids' support. It would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's 1 second left. Anybody else? If you are online and would like to participate in public comment, can you please raise your hand again? Okay. I see no hands raised online. One more chance for anyone in the room. Okay. If you want to. I mean, we extended it. We have 9 more minutes on what we extended it to, if anybody does want to speak, but no pressure.
So Leslie McCarthy, town meeting member for a Tucker parent, active member of the Tucker PTO. I hesitate to speak because I know I've spoken before other boards in the past, but I just echoing what Christine and others have said. Thank you for your support and all of what you're doing to fund our schools. I've been a witness to what level spending looks like at the schools over the past few years, as I've watched my kids learn and watched the teachers really do everything that they can with less and less funding each year, and so really appreciate all you're doing to advocate for our kids. And I think a lot of people have said, oh, you know, maybe parents can fund or people can fill the gaps if we can't reach level funding. That just it's not an equitable solution for our town, and so really urge you to continue to doing the hard work, to know that you have the support of me and of our community for all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you to everybody who came to speak tonight. Definitely appreciate your making time and effort to come share your views with us. So with that, we can conclude public comment and move into the superintendent's report.
Great. So first of all, we still have school tomorrow.
Thank you.
I know there are Facebook messages out there saying school has been called. That is not true. We are watching the weather. For anyone listening, we're watching the weather and are in consultation with the Department of Public Works, and we'll make a decision in the morning. If things change right now, based on the current weather forecast, we feel like we've got this handled. The DPW is going to be out early. They have some contractors coming in, so I think we're going to be okay. So just want to let everyone know that's where we're at with that. I wanted to mention one quick thing. I know there are a number of things under my report tonight, so I'm going to, and it's primarily budget. So I wanted to just mention, since our last meeting, we had an incident at Tucker last week, a lockdown, and many of you know kind of the story. It was in the news in terms of what happened. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank the entire Tucker community, to thank Milton Police, all of our staff, parents, everybody. We were, in case you don't know the exact specifics, they were in lockdown for 12 minutes as the police were trying to determine what was happening and if there was any danger. That's 12 minutes where you don't know if you're in that building, you don't know what's happening, you don't know why, you just do the drill. So it was just wonderful in the aftermath of that to see the Tucker community come together as it always does. We had a debrief with staff afterwards. There's been ongoing support as well. And everyone kind of processes something like this differently. It kind of touches people in different ways. So I just wanted to thank everyone involved. And we did have an after-action debrief just to talk about what did we learn from that, what went well, what can we improve upon next time, talking about communication, response, coordination with police. So that was, I think, really positive in terms of kind of learning from it as well. So that was kind of the thing I wanted to share. I know I did also want to just give Bao a shout out here, Saturday, February 8th, right?
Yes. 5 to 7 p.m. at Pierce Middle School, we'll have our Milton's first Lunar New Year celebration. There will be a lot of activities, fun arts and crafts and performances, and of course a lot of free candies and crackers. And we also have some vendors coming to sell their product as well, including Mr. Chan's local in East Milton Square. They're selling their lunch boxes, and we have bubble tea, tang hulu. If you don't know what tang hulu is, you will find out when you're there.
Fruit.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
The candy-coated fruit, yeah. And dumplings, of course. So, yeah, it will be a fun event. Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, unless there are any questions about the Tucker incident,
I don't have a question about it, but I will, as the Tucker parent at the table here, I will just like to thank you and your staff and Tucker staff. Obviously a tragic event, and I think our thoughts are definitely with the family, and also I heard positive feedback, and for myself just really appreciated what did feel like a different level of proactive communication in relation to a scary and tragic event like that, and especially the way that you followed up later in the day to provide information sort of beyond what was provided in as close to real time as possible. I think that was appreciated. So thank you for how everybody there handled it. And yeah, never want to see those things happen, but if they do happen, it's really important that we can have confidence in the way that the district is prepared to deal with it and keep our kids safe. So, thanks.
So student representative report is next.
It looks like they stepped out.
Yeah, they probably step out.
Okay.
I also want to say that I appreciate the way you worked with Milton Police Department to make sure that everything went smoothly, and we appreciate the communication. It's always scary, but thank you so much for your leadership and your ability to work well with other departments in this town.
Thank you. Yeah. They're a huge asset to us and to the fact that we have 2 SROs that work throughout the district too, and they do so much. It's even hard to define what their role is, because they are not, they're doing a lot of educational work at the same time that they're also focused on security and supporting a well environment. So huge asset.
Thanks.
Do we want to skip?
Yeah, maybe we'll come back if they rejoin. We can come back to them.
They know they're presenting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, because I just saw them a second ago. Okay. So I'll keep going.
Yeah, sure. Maybe
Okay.
State guidance update.
So it's been kind of a flurry of, over the past few weeks, a flurry of information coming from the federal government, and a lot of questions our community about, how are we responding, what's happening. I think kind of superintendents as a whole tend to look to the state and to our superintendent organization, who often will, when something happens, an executive order or something is enacted, they will very quickly get legal counsel involved. They will look at the issue, and then they will communicate with us and say, here's what you need to be thinking about relative to what just happened. So we have been getting communication from the Superintendent's Association is MASS. So they have been sharing information with us. I got something recently about executive orders in whole and how to respond to them in general. So this went out to everyone, just saying, like, be thoughtful about how you are interpreting those, really kind of like research them. The public comment today around Title IX and transgender youth. So all of those kinds of things that I think that the main message has been, don't be reactive, be thoughtful, do the research, engage, and then also obviously stand up for what we believe. It has been helpful that the Attorney General's office has been putting out some guidance for us. I shared with the community, was that 2 weeks ago? The information on immigration enforcement, and I think that was very timely. Every single district was trying to figure out what we need to share something. Like, everybody is talking about this, concerned about this. We need to send something out. So we were actually in process writing something and trying to do it on our own, and having that guidance come in was very, very helpful. We also shared Combating Hate in Our Schools, which also came from the AG's office as well last week. So we are, as we're kind of finding our way through here, and recently you've probably seen a number of different kind of news reports around the Department of Education and funding, and so there's not a lot of specificity yet in terms of any of that. So I think we are watching all that. I just want you all in the community to know that I am watching that with the state, and making sure that we are well prepared for whatever is coming from, like, a statement to something that actually is something that we have to respond to. So I think there's probably more of these in future meetings. I think I'll be coming back and sharing more about different things that we're responding to as those potential changes are made, and again, kind of making sure that we're both following the law and we're also kind of living our values and standing up for our values.
So we, as school committee members, also received access to the same guidance through the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And so it's good to be on the same page, with that. And I would personally just also like to thank you for how you proactively communicated around that piece. I think that was really important. And yes, I'm glad to hear you say your, you know, your commitment to ongoing communication. And I think it's just important for us to remember, and you know, I think this is relevant to our policy discussion later too, that we do follow not only federal laws but also state laws, and you know, Massachusetts laws offer a number of protections that, you know, going forward, we with some of the changes in process may or may not be completely in alignment. And anyway, that's just something we will all have to keep on top of as we go forward. So thank you for the updates on that. Does anyone have questions or any discussion on that piece?
I appreciate the guidance. Again, I think it's there's a lot of stuff coming out. It's hard to keep pace with it. And I appreciate the comments that were made at public comment. Totally agree with, again, that. And while so much is up in the air, making sure we are leading with values and leading on, you know, the legal experts that we have within our town and also within our state to know what we can do. And if there are circumstances where, again, what we are required to do federally versus, and that conflicts potentially with our values, I hope you'll raise that here, and that's a discussion we can have collectively on like how we proceed forward as a district.
Thanks.
I saw
It
Les
looks-
a second ago. and
Oh.
then- If you all see him come in, can you tell him
grab
to?
Is
Okay.
it? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
We're mic'd up, so we're thinking we're like trying to talk not too loud.
Okay, well, the next
Program of
MHS
studies,
program of
yeah.
studies, let's talk about that. And yeah, if he comes back, we'll try to bring him in. Definitely would like to get him in here before we dive into the budget, hopefully. But yeah, program of studies.
So this is a two-part agenda topic. So this is a kind of like a policy where we're sharing it now, and then Karen Cahill will be coming back or coming to the next meeting to answer questions that you might have. So I'm happy to kind of like walk through this, or if you all want to take time between now and our next meeting to kind of review this, look at it, and generate questions, we can also do it that way as well. She has a slight more knowledge about some of the specificity on some of these things, but you can try me.
I have a couple. One question I had was just the ability to add any additional graduation requirements. I assume that's a discussion we would have on this board and committee, and I guess I don't know if that is kind of within this context or with another context. I guess like one thing that comes to mind is just like, you know, I think people talk about financial literacy, the importance of that within these programs. I'm not sure we have enough staff right now in the budgets to fund those positions, so I think there's also like that combination of conversations, and so that's why I think like just whatever conversation around, are there additional things within kind of what we think, I think having a robust conversation around like what we think really kids need as they graduate high school, especially given the opportunity that the lack of now an MCAS competency determination provides us, is a conversation I'd be interested in having and talking about what that means and what resources the school would need to kind of achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm. We talked about more in the context of adding additional coursework, and there you will see there are some new courses that are proposed here. I think we thought kind of given both where we are and what we think will happen, which is the state responding to this change in the competency determination to come forward with a new requirement, which then would potentially shift, and it's probably not going to be financial literacy, right? The state wouldn't come forward with something like that, but that we would want to return to our grad requirements at that point to look at, are there additional, is there additional coursework that we'd want to engage that We have talked about foreign language as a requirement.
Yep. That was my second question. 'Cause
Okay.
the mass core, right.
And you know, most kids do take a world language.
Mhm.
In talking about it, we thought it might make sense to wait for 1 year, and just given kind of where we are right now with our budget process, looking at next year, that it made sense to continue to look at that and bring that back next year.
Is there a concern that there's not enough foreign language, the staffing in foreign language is not robust enough to accommodate all students taking it?
Yeah.
We're within the context of the override, if that again is something we should be talking about, kind of.
Yeah.
It's hard to have
Yeah.
all these conversations simultaneously, but
Yeah.
they all just
Yeah.
build on each other and impact each other. I don't want to dominate if other people have questions, but I got a couple more. I'll jump in with another one. I'm sorry, Lizzie, please go.
I was just going to voice that I'm looking forward to understanding more about the community service proposed change. It looks like a decrease in the overall hours. I don't have access to the data linked in here, so that may help explain the proposal for the change or the rationale, but I'm just hoping that's maybe something she can come prepared to speak to.
I believe we are an outlier in terms of the amount that we require compared to other districts.
35 versus the 15 being proposed, current 35 hours versus 15 being proposed. Sure, yeah, I'll just look forward to hearing
I
the
think she would be
process,
able to
sort
share.
of what has
Yep.
led to this recommendation, and in order to consider that.
I guess another thing I'd be interested in hearing about is just the process by which parents are allowed to, or students are allowed to like choose the coursework. I know that's aligned to this, not 100%, because it's, the courses I guess don't technically matter for the graduation requirement, but just question around a student's ability to opt into a course, like what are they required to get teacher approval to be in courses? Can students and families override that? What does that look like? Just as we continue to think about how we ensure access to rigorous coursework for all students and ensure there aren't barriers if that's what kids want and families want to kind of challenge their children. Though they're not children at the point at which they're high school, but you know what I mean. So that's a question I had. And the last one, I, again, continue to really believe strongly in access to AP coursework and like just putting rigorous instruction in front of students and forcing them to engage with it and learn from it and challenge, and all the research around taking an AP course, even if you don't pass it, improves your likelihood of attending and graduating from college. And so like, is there something around, you know, an AP for All initiative where we require students to take at least one AP course within their high school career in order to, again, kind of increase that sense of rigor, increase that college-going culture, and the people being able to see themselves within those and provide more opportunities for kids, whether or not they choose to go to college or not. That's something else that I believe strongly we should be looking at.
So I think hearing Mark for me sort of tells me that we should be looking at this probably a little bit higher up, right? Not so much in the weeds, because we're now getting into this particular courses being proposed and all of these sort of changes that do have, you know, implications, but really sort of stepping back and sort of given the changes with MCAS and sort of looking at our graduation requirements, what does this mean, and what is it that we would be hopefully driving toward, and how are we going to get there? In the budgetary implications, obviously, because I think the more we are sort of looking forward beyond this year, the stronger case we can make, so we can move beyond level funding and really think about needs, right? We can't have this aspirations of this wonderful town we want to be and all these offerings we want to have if we're not willing to spend the money. And so I think it's important for us. So I think taking this probably to a higher level and really thinking about it that way at least would be helpful for me, rather than looking at these particular changes in this 1 year, which is how we sort of have approached things. And I don't know if, sort of within 2 weeks' time, we'll be ready for that, but I would encourage us to continue to think from that perspective.
I completely agree with that. I think that's a really smart way to look at it. And I think even when we get into our budget discussions, I think kind of planning for the future so that we're not in this like hamster wheel every year, it would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think very well
Yep.
said. And what you say makes me think of something you mentioned in the budget process, which is, again, speaking about where you're trying to go within the budget, right? As you're talking about those needs, like what is the vision that we really have for the educational opportunities for our kids, and how the budget is building towards that. I think great points from both of you.
Okay, great. So we'll look forward to that in 2 weeks.
Great.
We'll dig into it more. Is the expectation that we need to be approving it 2 weeks from now?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe, then the framing, you could work with Principal Cahill to help us get to the point of being able to approve what needs to be approved, and also perhaps elements of that can continue beyond as needed, whether that's about the process for AP access, increasing that or what have you, but yeah, sounds good. Okay, thanks. All right, so are you ready? Thank you so much for being here tonight. We've reached the student representative portion of our superintendent's report.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
My peer, whom I was supposed to present with tonight, is unexpectedly not here. So I was wondering of his whereabouts, but I am ready to speak now. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name is Elias Caros, and I am the 11th grade representative representing the class of 2026, as many of you all know. And in this new year of 2025, as the school committee representatives, we have sort of made a decision to come every school committee meeting, about 1 or 2 of us, and to share some brief updates on the pursuits of our student body and the Milton High School student government. So I'm delighted to be with you here. So first of all, as a group of the school committee representatives, we have finalized our survey on the technology policy, and this will go out to students, parents, and staff members. And as Olivia, one of my other peers, outlined this in detail to you last meeting. So we are ready with that, and we will hope to send it out very soon. And with that, I will like to inform you about our other pursuits as a part of the MHS student government as a whole. We are in the midst of organizing and preparing for several fundraisers, which will hopefully raise money for the big and memorable events that we've all cherished as a part of our high school careers, like prom and graduation and spring semi. And to raise money for all of these events, we are pursuing several fundraisers. First, we have our on March 23rd, that's a Sunday, the Harlem Wizards are going to come to Milton High School and do a Wizards versus staff game. And this is something I think we did March of 2023, 2 years ago, and it was a great fundraiser. We had a turnout of over 1,000 people, mainly families and elementary school aged students, and that was a big success. And the funds raised from it were divided among all 4 of our classes, and this is something that we hope to do this year and hopefully have a big turnout. And then in addition, actually today is when it closed, we're doing a Krispy Kreme fundraiser, and this is just at Milton High School, and this is also something very popular, something we do multiple times per year. And Ms. Beliveau, one of our school adjustment counselors, is driving 2 hours to Connecticut on a school day to get these donuts. So it's very
worth it.
She's doing us a big favor, and it's something that's very fun. It's something very engaging. We all love them, and you can get a dozen for about $14. So that's going to help raise money and contribute to our overall cause. And I just wanted to mention also that the class of 2024 last year raised enough money to fund all of the caps and gowns for their graduation so that no student had to pay. And I think that this is one of our goals as the MHS student government, to ensure that students can confidently go up and graduate and celebrate their time and all of their hard work without having to face that burden. And that's one of our goals for this year, next year, and the years coming. And then coming up next week is our Valentine's Day cabaret, and as a member of the music department, that's something I'm very passionate about. So it's next Thursday, and that's something you should go out and see and support. And it really sort of showcases our diversity and our passion for arts. And those are some of the many pursuits that the student body is going after, and we thank you for our support, for your support, especially with the funding of these events and your willingness to go out of your way to support us. So thank you.
Thank you, Elias, for coming and sharing all that. Does anyone, and thank you, Bao, for continuing to work with our student reps. Anyone have any questions?
This is great. When are the Krispy Kreme donuts coming?
Today's the last day.
Yes, so they're coming next week, actually, on the half day.
Okay, great. Yes.
Good to know.
Might have to go in late to work.
Well, thank you for that very thorough report.
Thank you.
Seems like you all are very busy fundraising.
Yes.
So thank you. And excited to know that the technology survey is going out soon, and looking forward to hearing the results.
Of course, we will share that with you promptly when we receive it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Have a good night.
Yep,
You too.
a highlight, and we get to segue straight into
Budget.
discussion. So,
But there's an idea. Krispy Kreme.
It's a fundraiser. Townwide.
how big do you think Miss Bellow's car is?
Yeah, I'll try.
I'll volunteer. I'll
many
drive
can
2
she
hours.
carry
Like a
back?
giant, like, you know, trip
Oh,
down. We gotta keep
Sell
it light.
them.
Pay for itself. I don't know.
sell them out of the gazebo. Town hall. Okay. Well, I know that Finance Subcommittee met today. We have a Finance Subcommittee report a little bit later in the agenda for vendor warrants, but I'll just maybe hand it over
It
to
might
you.
be helpful
and
to move them together.
Sure.
Or move the 26 budget conversation down to that report. Either way.
I think, well, let's talk about, I think we committed to talk about the budget before the calendar tonight, just to give it its energy and prime time of our meeting. So I think we should just dive into that.
Okay.
If you think, I guess what I would say is we could move the Finance Subcommittee report up. Mark, if you want to provide some updates as far as the meeting this morning, what was discussed there, and then kind of move into the FY26, whatever you all think is best.
Sure. You want to start with 25?
Yeah.
All right. I think I got this pulled up. We have some slides that Katie put together. Just going to share. Okay. Am I sharing the right screen?
The slides are in the finance folder from this morning.
I'm sorry, I can move a copy into
It's-
the,
I think that would be helpful, just going
I can
forward.
do
But,
that,
yeah, give me
absolutely.
go, thank you.
I don't know if I'm sharing the right things, to be honest. Hold on. Apologize for those folks. It's coming up here, but, all right, I'm just seeing the entire screen. Great. Yeah, great. So we met this morning to talk about the FY25 budget. We were hoping to talk about FY26 as well. We didn't get much time, any time on that, because we really dove into the FY25 budget. So this is some of the information kind of that is a recap that we've shared previously with this board and with the community as a whole. A couple of things to just clarify. First of all is some people have asked me, like, how the school already spent over, $2.5 million. To be clear, we have not overspent thus far. What is happening is that Katie is doing a great job of, again, keeping her eye on the ball, and we are projecting that if nothing were to change as of today, or as of a couple weeks ago when she first put this together, the Q2 report, we would end the year, right, at the end of June, with this deficit. So obviously we are not going to do nothing, and so the whole point of this recap and the bringing it to the board's attention is just that we're going to need to do something to, again, offset the increased expenditures in the particular line items, and we'll go through those again, but just want to make that very clear. We don't anticipate ending the year in the same place we are currently projecting, because there's work we'll need to do to close that gap. And at this point, we're not asking the town, the select board, anybody as of right now to provide us additional funding to close any gap. We are working within our own budget to close the gap that we are projecting, again, currently. So that's just part of the financial process. That's why we do Q2 reports. Very appreciative of Katie sharing this. One thing when we started this year within the Finance Committee that we were very embarrassed, may not be the right word, but upset about, was the way the deficit rose last year, with like a lack of transparency and public engagement process around that this was coming up, really. And so wanted to make sure that we were doing a much better job of kind of keeping, again, the board as a whole up to date, but also, again, the community as a whole, given it's very serious. Like, the money we spend is impactful and impacts students. It's a big part of the town budget. It's really important that we take that very seriously, spend that really wisely, have clear and constant eyes on that, and make sure we're doing that responsibly and that people have trust within that process. So again, the sharing it of it now is just to try and improve that transparency that we didn't feel like really existed as well as we wanted it to last year. So that's some broad framing. You can please jump in if there are. So again, recapping in terms of the areas of concern that have been brought up around this deficit are ones that have been concerns last year and were a part of the deficit that came out of FY24. Special ed transportation, utilities, substitute teacher budget. Those are the large ones that kind of Katie has particularly identified as being, well beyond current expenditures, and projected expenditures being kind of well beyond what was budgeted. Those are also ones that are just very difficult to curb because special ed transportation are mandated. We can't refuse them. We can work to try and get better agreements and better contracts for the service providers. That's also very hard. You look around, talk to any district, transportation costs are incredibly challenging. That's something many superintendents and school committees talk about. Came up last year within our, the school committee association was how do we stop kind of this collusion it feels like within transportation industries. Not to say that's what our vendors are doing, but just to be clear. Utilities is another one. We just historically underfunded that line item, and so that's a problem. And there's some things we can control within that, but only so much. And the last one is substitute teacher budget. Is again, other than just trying to encourage good health and attendance from staff, we know just staff will be out sometimes for great reasons, like having new kids. Sometimes for not great reasons, like they're sick, but just for legitimate reasons that occur. And so, but those are the three areas that we are currently over, and so we'll need to make cuts in other areas to cover those. Just to update this board, this is the new stuff around just the initial things we are doing to, as we said, curb the 2.3 million and shrink that down to, the goal is to shrink it down to zero, obviously. So some things that have been put in place already within the district is a purchase order freeze. So all kind of purchasing across schools is frozen pending kind of approval for emergency things from central office. Hiring freeze, similarly, right, kind of review of all open positions, and obviously central office make a determination if a role is absolutely essential or required because of special education purposes or other mandates. There's other work, and some of these kind of get into the details around just how we are thinking about moving some funds around. So we do have some revolving funds that can be used to cover portions of salaries and do some chargebacks, which is a little bit further down. Look at kind of deferring some consolidated facilities costs. So these are needed maintenance and facility work that we're just not going to be able to do. We need to defer those costs and push those out. So again, I guess one thing just to emphasize with all these things, none of these are like, oh great, it was fluff and we're cutting them. There are impacts to each and every one of these things that negatively impact a different part of our budget or a different part of our operations. But these are the things that the district at this point is identifying as kind of having an impact on our ability to shrink the deficit while doing as much as we can to limit the impact on our students primarily and our staff also as we look to kind of cut this budget down. There
point
is
of clarification
please, yeah.
on the third budget.
Yep.
Third bullet. Can you explain that? Because I don't want people to read that slide and have ideas about what that might mean. That allocate a portion of, can you just explain that?
Yeah, so food service account is the food account. As y'all can imagine, their funding comes from the federal government for school meals. There's also probably some income related to students buying second meals. I know my kids buy like 4 breakfasts every morning, it seems, based on their food account. So like those things go in, staff can purchase accounts, and that goes into a revolving account for food service expenses that is to go to support the food service program. Those funds have to go to support staffing and equipment and materials like food, produce and things that go to service the food service account. The custodians obviously service the entire building, but they also service the cafeteria. They do cleaning and support within the kitchen and within the cafeteria. And so Katie and her creative ways of thinking about how to address this, saying some of the funds raised through the food service accounts can go to cover some of the salary expenses associated with those custodians' time, so their FTE. And so that is where
It's
that
their
number comes
time
from.
spent providing custodial services for the cafeterias. Just to be clear, we're not taking away any custodial salary from custodians.
Yes, it's great
Thank you.
clarification.
Okay,
This
thank you.
is a budgeting, accounting move, or more so than that one is not an operational impact.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Great, appreciate the clarification. The circuit breaker supplemental funding, that's something that, again, Katie has flagged as it's come out of the governor's proposed budget as supplemental funding for the current year, because the impacts for special education costs going up and up is something that is impacting the entire state. And so the governor has identified that based upon advocacy across the state from schools and school districts. It's not 100% clear, given the governor's budget is not the final budget, it needs approval from legislature. It's not 100% clear how that will end up. Typically, most things, the governor's budget is slightly more conservative than the final budget, but that's not always true. And then the other piece here that is of concern that Katie's flagged on this is like just the timing, because of the process for the budget approval sometimes can slip past the end of the fiscal year, slip past June 30th. And so counting on that is something that we're not sure what the amount is, and we're not sure when it would be available. So that is funds we are hoping can come from the state to help close some of the gaps, especially with special ed transportation, but not sure. So more to come on that. As I mentioned before, offsets, so community schools, Medicaid, building use, these are different accounts that we can charge slightly more than we normally would to those to help offset within the current fiscal year. It's not something we can do or like to do kind of long term. It's not good financial practice, and those accounts will run low. So given where we currently are, this is what Katie and Peter are proposing at this time. Those are also accounts that we're going to continue to look on, see if there's any additional give within them. But again, part of this is like robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so it's helping us in the current year, but it has other impacts. It's not just no impacts.
So I do have a question.
Please.
I think when we closed out last year, didn't we also do the same with community schools, if I remember correctly?
Yes, last year to close the $4 million deficit, $1 million was used across the revolving funds, $500 from community schools, $500 from the nutrition program, actually. Building use, I don't remember if we used much or how much we used.
No, I remember community schools that I know we discussed it. Okay.
Yeah. So that account, as we know and we've looked at in past years, has been historically quite robust, but as we pulled down last year, if we continue to pull down, and as we are trying to support that director in growing the program to serve more kids and hire more staff, and like all those things pull from that program. And so that's the balance. And the last piece is the substitute coverage, just if there are ways we can reduce that by asking staff within the current buildings to take on more. As a public speaker said, our staff already do a whole lot, so it always feels terrible to just ask them to do more, but it is something that unfortunately we're kind of in that situation where we might need to find other staff that currently are within the building and figure out how we can utilize them better to reduce that.
But to be clear on that piece,
please.
They are compensated for their time, right? When they are pulled in for a prep period or something of that kind, it's just different from having a sub for the whole day.
Well, that's if a teacher is covering. So there are certain contracts where if a teacher is covering, right, that's under the union agreement, and that's collectively bargained, and so
following those.
anything that occurs within the collectively bargained will be followed, has to be followed, should be followed.
I just want to make sure that
I
anybody
appreciate
listening
you keeping
understands what we're to what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're thinking more, again, if there's flexibility within instructional aides, within any other positions, support at recess or support
Within
any
the
other
time
types of
they're
duties.
already working.
The principals, assistant principals, who again, don't have enough to do already with their huge buildings and small staffs. But yeah, just thinking creatively as we need to do in these moments around that. All that together cuts the deficit down pretty significantly.
The projected deficit.
Thank you so much, Selena. Yes, the projected deficit significantly, so we feel good about the implementation of all those things. It does not bring it to zero, and so there's still ongoing work the Finance Committee needs to do, that the district needs to do, and in consultation with the Finance Committee, and then within this group around how the remaining balance kind of keeps getting whittled down. And again, as we get further away from kind of these things, it is possible, if not probable, that those impacts start to be felt more and more by students based upon changes to programs. So, well, that's where we're at right now.
I have a comment as a school committee member who's sat here the longest, that I greatly appreciate this level of detail and transparency to be having this conversation mid-year, which I don't recall ever having, actually. And to me, I feel like there's a little bit of, maybe not a little bit, but a narrative in our community that sort of looks at this conversation as a problem, as something that's like bad that's happening now that hasn't happened before. And I just think we can probably do more to help the community actually understand that it's the inverse of that. What we're doing is being proactive to address a projected deficit and to sort of talk about what it means and what we can do about it to avoid being in a situation where we're late in the year, needing to do what happened last year, recognizing a lot of these costs and a lot of what's driving this are out of the control of our district and are being experienced by districts throughout Massachusetts because of the nature of some of the issues. But I would just like to thank you for, having this detailed discussion and to help, just to appreciate the transparency of this opportunity to actually understand where we're at in order to be able to do things about it, And I know that you actually had to do a lot of manual calculations to even be able to project this level of detail. Because our systems aren't necessarily set up to automatically provide that information. So thank you for that. And I hope that people listening to this conversation tonight that gain the information, understand that, our ability to have this conversation is a strength of our leadership that we have right now. It's not a sign of the weakness of our leadership. It's actually a breath of fresh air to be able to have this conversation with that level of detail and to be, you can't solve a problem until you confront it, right? Which is what we are in the middle of needing to try to do, and FY26 is a big part of that, so that's why we'll talk about that. But
can I just add just a little bit of the conversation that we had earlier today, and if we go back just kind of to the recap slide, some of what we talked about earlier in our meeting is, of course, the specifics of looking at the deficit, but it's also looking at our practice and our budget practice and just ensuring that we're taking steps to establish sound business practice, and that everybody's kind of aware of what that looks like so that we can provide accurate, transparent numbers throughout multiple points of the school year. Although the number right now is a projected deficit, being able to talk about it now gives us the ability to address it. And as you had mentioned, going forward as we establish that practice, we'll be able to address it even sooner next year. Some of the other points that I wanted to make, just that we had talked about earlier, is when we talk about areas of concern and in looking forward to the fiscal year 26 budget, one of the areas that was a part of our process this year was not only looking at the historical budget numbers, but looking at the historical expenses. And so I think a part of the past practice in some areas, typically around general expenses, was not to look at what the past actual expenses were, but to just carry forward the historical budget numbers. And so in some instances, if we had ran a deficit in the past year, we would just be carrying forward a historical budget number that wasn't appropriate and didn't represent our past expenses. And so a big part of the work that we did in creating the budget for fiscal year 26 was truly to have the level service budget be representative of expenses that we had incurred. In some instances, we looked at utilities and the substitute teacher budget over 3 years, over a span of historical data. And so in taking that information and looking at the rates and looking at utilization and looking at a number of different factors, that's the information that we use to then build fiscal year 26. The level service budget number we know is 9.44%, but it reflects kind of the right sizing of us going through that process. And so that process is going to continue. It's a lot of work that we need to do, but I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that that work is happening. Mm-hmm. That work is truly occurring every day. And so although we also talked about it's a unique position to be in because we're truly focusing on 2 fiscal years at the same time. We're administering a budget, we're creating a budget, and in the summer we'll be closing a budget, opening a budget, and creating a new one. And so we need to be strategic about living in multiple years. We can't be just talking about 25. We need to look at that history, we need to incorporate the history, we need to closely monitor the current year, and then we need to be able to project for the future. And I know that everyone, but it's really important to do that because it's just supporting all of the work of the district. And so we talk about it so much. There's so much work that goes into it at finance subcommittee, and it's really important. We understand how important it is. So I just wanted to add that just because I think that sometimes I just want everyone to feel confident and people to know that there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes to make sure that we're being really responsible about our budget practice.
Can I just add, I think one of the things that's been great and important is that by having somebody new come in, you almost have to look at things fresh in the sense of it's impossible to have a carryover budget because you have to get in the weeds and know what's being carried over. So you're literally looking at every line, at every expense, at everything. So it's almost like not necessarily an audit, but it's a complete fresh perspective or complete fresh eyes looking at this budget. So it almost is, it's not a zero-based budget, but in a sense it's looking at it completely that way because it's like what do we need to budget based on the past expenses as opposed to your point, oh, I know we had this last year, we're going to carry it over this year, but you don't have that history in a positive way to do that. So you had to come in and look at it new. So I think that that's really been a huge benefit, and that you had your eyes on it early, and to be able to say, and to be able to do this now, and be able to come to us and say, hey, here are some things that I'm seeing. we need to be on it now. And, you know, and we did talk about it, and I just do think it's really important to reiterate is that this right sizing is incorporated in the numbers that you're projecting. So we're not saying it's, you know, that we're presenting a budget for next year with level of service, but it doesn't account for this. So it's not like, oh, that number plus, oops, this incremental amount, that's been taken into account. Like the budget was built with the exercises that you've gone through for determining what it is. So it's not starting at a deficit next year with that number. So I just think that that's important to know. But thank you, Katie.
Well, and I hope also that folks recognize what's at stake. That if, given all the hard work you put into FY26 budget, just level service, that if we don't get that approved at that level, the conversation at this particular juncture next year will be worse than right now. So I think that's something that I hope we can continue to emphasize and make the case for why the need, what you're presenting is there, and that it's addressing a historical issue. It's not something that is just this year. It's been there. We just didn't have sort of someone walking us through this process that would point out all these critical issues with the budgeting process. And so, I mean, it's up to us, obviously, as the committee to continue to voice that and make the case. And I would look to our wonderful folks who have shown up today to help us sort of continue to make that case, because it's important. And I know that not everyone has an opportunity to sort of go through every presentation and understand it, but it is important for us to continue to message that.
Just another thing I wanted to add relative to this too is the fact that the practice of not nailing and really understanding each line item and not having reserves is a near impossibility, right? So one of the issues we're in right now, which we are facing and working on, and it's a multi-year process, is rebuilding our reserves. So because we had to zero those out at the end of last year, we are in a process of rebuilding to be able to respond when we do have increased costs. That's what they're there for. And so that is a part of that change that Katie is mentioning, is having that reserve account as well, to be able to utilize that, but to have every line item be exactly where we expect the expenditure to be, and not be able to rely on reserves if we don't get it just right.
I just want to add that we are so grateful to have you here this year for this process, because I think we would be completely lost without you, and would not be having this conversation. So I appreciate all the work that you are doing and saying, hey, we need to do this right now in order to close this gap. So I appreciate, and I look to your leadership to kind of guide us, and we hope to continue to support you. I know we've talked a lot about level service tonight, heard comments about level service. I do worry that level service is not good enough, because there are a lot of things on our needs-based budget that we also need to fund, because that prevents us from getting to where we want to be, right? And so I think I caution, because last year was also level service. This year is also level service, so to kind of reiterate to the community that we need more than level service, because there are things on our needs-based budget, like that ELA curriculum that affects every student in elementary school. So I hope families understand how important that needs-based budget is, not just level service. So there are, because we went with level service last year, and there were a lot of cuts that we couldn't have. Every site council presentation, principals come in and they talk about the needs that weren't met and the impacts they have. And I think, Mark, you made a good point earlier to kind of understand, like, it's not just a teacher gets cut here or we don't have that, but what is that impact, on your student and the experience they have.
you know, each year those students lose those resources, that's a year they don't get back. I mean, we had students earlier that talked about they've been here for 12 years or 13 years. They're only here for a short time, right? So that year of not having that resource is huge. So I just want to say, you know, I mean, as you know, I will always push for needs-based budget over level service because I think that's how we grow, that's how we improve, we change our practices, we have great leadership, and we want to continue to support them. And if we can't make that happen, I think we're going to be in the same boat next year, wondering, and we've lost another year. So, and I want to make sure that our teachers are supported. You know, they are incredible assets to our district, and you know, I appreciate when my kids come home and talk about their experiences with their teachers, and you know, getting excited about reading books, and you know, the way they are challenged and encouraged, and I just, you know, I just want to make sure that the MPS teaching staff knows how much they mean to, you know, and I'm going to speak for myself, how much they mean to me. So I will do everything I can to advocate for them. Thank you.
Very well said. I think that transitions well into SY26, but before that, just to let the committee know, the Finance Committee is having having a meeting on Monday on FY26 because we weren't able to get to it at our most recent meeting because we talked about FY25, but then we're having a follow-up on the FY25 coming back from February break. So I think there will be more information to continue to share with this committee. And then also, obviously, the Select Board has invited us to a conversation next Tuesday, and I assume this is kind of the same information we will share with them at that time to keep them abreast if they are of interest to this issue we are dealing with.
Yeah, and so on next Tuesday, we'll talk about quick updates on FY25, the way I think you just did. Helpful, very helpful. Clear up some, I think, misinformation that might be out there. And then, you know, roll into the FY26 conversation, which this is a little bit of an update here. We have a couple like scheduling pieces. We are, I haven't been able to share this with you all. We're here in a meeting, so I'm going to share it. Tuesday night select board meeting is going to be cross-posted as a school committee meeting, a joint meeting, for the portion of their meeting which pertains to the school budget. So we thank the select board, thank Chair Wells for sort of agreeing to go with that format. It's somewhat unconventional. It does, though, allow us as the school committee, those of us who are available, which may not be all of us, but I do believe that we are able to present a quorum at that meeting. So as long as we can have that, 4 of us, then we are able to have a meeting where, you know, hopefully we can participate in answering questions and sharing perspectives, you know, in the course of the discussion, following the presentation aspect that we'll be able to have from both Peter and Katie there, which is really great. So that is definitely going to be good. The community budget Q&A session that is listed here, that is, I want to thank Peter and Katie for, this is something that's kind of coming together in a really busy week, but we are going to be able to hold that on Monday at 5 p.m. I think we're going to do that here at the high school. That is not something all of us need to attend. I think we were thinking similar to the community coffees that we had around the calendar, where, you know, there will be a couple school committee members there. I think if more of us want to attend, we should know that like very soon in order to post that as a school committee meeting if 4 of us do want to attend. But the point of that is really not to give a big presentation, but just to try to answer questions that members of the community may have. Either they're listening to this conversation or they didn't get to, but they want to like come and ask questions of Peter, Katie, whoever else might be able to be there. So that's good, and we'll be able to have additional sessions of those following vacation, but that was like the only option for a time that we're able to do that next week. So that's just an update on that. But as far as FY26 goes, so Mark, you're saying you're meeting finance on Monday morning to go into more detail on FY26?
Yeah.
And from there, we will be able to then, based on the detail you go into on Monday, you will be able to bring that with you to Tuesday's select board meeting, right?
Yeah,
On some level, that will be important to be able to make the detailed request, to provide texture to the request for FY26.
Yep.
Okay, but then as for right now, we've seen, what do you want to talk to us about it as far as FY26 for right now?
So we haven't made any changes since we last presented FY26. The updates for FY26 are kind of the work we're doing to build the non-override budget. So we have been meeting with principals many times as we look at what our non-override budget looks like. I'm meeting with staff this week, so I'm going to each building and talking about where we are in the budget process, giving them kind of an understanding of what's coming up on the 11th, and then kind of future work we're doing as we kind of move towards an override. We are part of that process of developing that budget for the non-override is really like taking time with our principals to make sure that the positions that we're putting on there have we're kind of thinking with a student lens and student impact as our kind of main lens as we put that together. We're talking about both preparing that and also the process we're going to use to share that with staff as well next week. So our plan is next week to have that completed and excuse me, and shared with staff. We are also talking a lot about communication and needing to share more communication from the district in terms of kind of the process ahead and the steps that we're taking. We sent something last week. We are kind of talking about a weekly communication on the budget, sharing kind of process, sharing kind of the factual information of kind of where we are and where we are in that process to help people better understand. I know that has come up tonight from many of you that there's lots of noise around the community around what is and what is not. So I think it's important for us to really share, here's exactly where we are, here's the work that we've done, and here's the work that's ahead, and really helping people to understand the budget as a whole. So that is something that I'm working on with our communications director, Stephanie O'Keefe, to put it in a kind of a format that people can really assimilate and understand.
So what does a non-override budget look like? I mean, is there a number that's being given that you're saying I'll work to that? I don't understand.
Yeah, so it's the budget, it's the de facto budget if the override fails. So if there's an override, and let's say the override is X billion, and it is not approved, then the non-override budget is the budget that, if the override fails, that's the budget we have.
So it would be whatever our current budget is plus 2.5%, because that would be, or whatever the correct? Is that the way we'd be looking at it? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
How do you? I just don't understand how you get to that number, and maybe I'm not understanding the process.
Jump in. I mean, it's a bit like any other budget in that it's one number for the town still. It's obviously a much less number. The town is projecting 3.2 million, 3.3 million is kind of the amount of additional revenue gained from a non-override. That's obviously significantly less than the 9.5 million that combined kind of town shared services and school needs for a level service. hence the need for the override, but that's the additional funds. How those funds are divvied between schools, shared costs, town departments is like, as I said, any other budget year, in that it should be a collaborative conversation between us and the town around how those are split. There are some things that the town will say are like fixed costs for them associated with health insurance increases or things like that. There's going to be additional increase in unemployment insurance funding that they'll need to invest in. They have free cash of $4.5 million, and so how that plays into whatever funding is next year and where that goes.
So, but have
those
we gotten
things
that
are all
number? I mean, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I
is
don't
like,
know what the number is.
Do you know, so if it's combined and we know that there's 3.2 million in revenue, additional revenue, that goes into, that we're accounting for, but then where do we get, like, where does the number come? So does the town administrator say this? Does the select board, like, who determines what the split is, and when do you get the number so that you know how to build to that?
So again, technically the town administrator and the select board cannot tell the schools what the school budget is.
Okay.
So we establish that school budget, but it has to be collaborative with them. At this point, they've, I think, expressed in Nick's presentations around like a 2% increase from like our current budget, right, which is 69 million. Around that is kind of what would allow for a non-override.
So I guess a follow-up, is that the assumption you're using to
Yes,
have
that's-
these conversations?
That's, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
And so on Tuesday, with the select board, one of the things we'll be able to do with FY26, since this is our first public meeting with the select board, is the opportunity to present to them our level service and our needs-based budgets, which we have already seen here,
Right.
since we have been discussing this for quite some time already. But that's part of the content that they will have their first actual opportunity to hear. As far as, like you were pointing out, Anna, what are the needs? And I assume you're going to do this with warrant on Friday, right? Yeah.
We've already done this with warrant. We've had the presentation with warrant. Today, almost the entire, I'm sorry, to be clear, because I appreciate that, warrant subcommittee to the schools, so not the full warrant
Right,
committee.
yes.
So we've already had a meeting with them in January presenting the needs-based budget, the level service budget. This is a follow-up meeting that we've been trying to schedule for a while, and people's schedules are
Right,
just crazy
gotcha.
around, because essentially we met and took the full time to present, and so now trying to follow
Their
up to answer
questions.
questions.
Okay.
Again, as I was interrupted myself, most of them attended our meeting today, so they also got the sense of the
Great.
FY25 piece. So we anticipate on Friday, there might be some questions in FY25 as well, but
Okay.
also, again, FY26.
I want to make sure the needs don't get lost sight of. That's really important. And even if we're not, at some point, which we've done, need to prioritize the needs. And I know that when you initially presented that to us, it was just level service, needs-based, without prioritization among the needs. So
Yeah, my only clarification on that would be, I think they did prioritize the needs of, these are the need, like that wasn't the complete list of needs for the district. That was the prioritized needs were
Well,
the, just for,
Over the
again,
2
for-
years, right?
yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I guess I'm talking about
Yes,
drilling
with-
further down into
Yes,
to even
prioritize further.
prioritize the
Yeah.
priorities.
Yeah.
And I think, as it was said in
Yeah.
public comment earlier, there was position that wasn't filled for Pierce, and there's nothing on the needs base for next year for Pierce until the following year. So
Right.
again, just want to be mindful that when we are prioritizing needs, that we're being thoughtful about.
And and I would push that you almost already did that, because the needs presented to us were not
No.
out of this world.
No. They're almost like just
There's
a necessity.
They're the needs that we've been deferring for many years.
And those needs get more and more like important, and you could see the impact of not having those. And I think that's where it's really important to communicate that, right? Like what what does it mean not to have that,
And
right?
it's also
not just
indicative
a
to the town and our approach to budgeting, I must say. Because if we approach as a town our budgeting only as level funding to begin with, we're never looking at our town and seeing what is it that we really need so that we are that town that we want to be. But that conversation, I feel like, always gets derailed, at least since I started here. In my role, and I've been in those conversations, it's like, no, let's go with level funding, because that's a much more conservative way of approaching it, which I do agree, you don't want to get out of control, but you also got to allow yourself to aspire. And that aspiration hasn't really been part of the conversations since I've been sitting in my role.
Right, and I don't necessarily know if they're even aspirational positions. I think they're just...
Not for us.
No, I mean, they're not. And I think you could, it's so important to communicate the importance of that and what not having that means, right? And the impact that it has. And I think that's where, and I've mentioned this before, it's like when we get into things like per pupil spending, that doesn't translate emotionally, right? It's just a number, right? And I think it's so important to understand what that means. You could say, hey, we spend less, but, and then people will come back and say, well, you guys went over last year and you have a projected deficit this year, blah, blah, blah. It's not a strong argument, but I think the impact that those positions, I know Principal Cahill has come here 2 years in a row, 2 of my 3 years, then asked for the same positions that we have not been able to give her. So, and the impact of those and what the students want, right? Those classes are oversubscribed because that's what they want. And we can't, when we look at things through a student lens, right? Like, we can't give them what they're asking for, right? We're not giving them, like, more than they need. They're just asking for bare necessities to understand, so I think that is so important to convey because, and that's what we miss. Like, sometimes when we talk about budgets, it is numbers, right? And like sometimes numbers, they go over my head. I'm more of an emotional person, like, who understands and kind of tries to make connections. So, and I think that's so important to convey because it is an emotional connection, and you're investing in the schools, you're investing in the students, you're investing, in families. You want them to get return on their investment because you're asking them to invest money. You're asking them to say, you're asking them to pay, right? And you're expecting something, right? You're paying for a Krispy Kreme donut and you expect a donut, not no donut, right? Like, so. So that's what we're asking for, right? Like, you're asking them to pay, right? I get it. In some cases, it's a lot of money, but you have to show them return on investment. Like, what are those investments doing for these students? And I think that's what we need to convey more of. And when we just talk about numbers, that key piece of information gets lost.
We've had the opportunity to meet with staff, as Dr. Burrows said, throughout the week, and I think having the time to be able to hear from them and hear what the impact, because we've talked a lot about the budget this year and the steps that we're taking to address the budget this year, and then just talking about and looking at next year. And for me, because I don't always have the opportunity to engage with staff in that way, hearing them talk about the impact of not having certain tools that may be really helpful for them, and just almost like that feeling of, like, in some instances, like this, like, please, like, we're here with these students. We want to do right by these students. We want to do a really good job. And for them to say, like, it's really going to impact me if I can't have this. It's really going to impact me if I can't have this curriculum material. And I'm feeling like I can't do my job. And to sit there and to listen to the staff, and not our support staff and teaching staff, and even, all of the maintenance staff and everyone that truly the people that make these buildings run on a daily basis. I wish I could have them come here and present the budget, because I just feel like it's so important, and it really is just eye-opening. And so we've talked to them, and we've said any advocacy that we can bring here, any information that people may need, so that they really truly understand how important this is for our staff to feel empowered, that they can truly help it and just make a big impact on our kids. It's all work that I think we really collectively feel like we're putting a great value on. So I just wanted to mention that, because hearing from the staff, like, it really is, it means a lot to them. This is really important to them. So, and it's tough to tell them that they're not going to have access to certain things this year, because we're just really trying to address the deficit.
And I'm so glad you brought that perspective, because I feel like, we all sit here at our tables at different boards and make decisions, but don't realize what that impact. We might make a decision tonight, right now, for the immediate need, right? Like, let's just get through this year and we'll look at it next year, right? That's what we did last year, or what we had to, right? And then here we are again. So I think when we make these decisions, it's so important to have that perspective from the staff, from the staff, to understand what is it that motivates them and drives them to push our students and, get them to excel, right? And if we can't provide those tools, then, and we don't show that we're supportive of them, how do we expect them to be supportive of our students and to, empower our students, right? Like, so it is all connected. So I think when we make decisions here, we have to think long-term beyond FY25 or 26, right? Like, we have to think down the road, like, what are these decisions that we make here every single day, every single week, right? That, our subcommittees, in our committee meetings, at our various select board, they make the impact last beyond. And then we're kind of backtracking, backpedaling, and trying to fix those issues. And that's kind of, oftentimes we're just like in this vicious cycle. And I think it's so great that you're kind of looking through, and what I would like to see is kind of a plan for the next 5 years, right? Like, what does student success look, and what do we need to give you to make sure, like, what do you need, right, from us in terms of, and for us to advocate for is so, so important, because, like, I would hate for anyone to have this conversation and figure out, like, oh my gosh, we have to put a freeze on this and that, and like, we can't afford to buy paper in the district, like, it's just, it creates a pandemonium, and it's just, it's ridiculous that we have to do that. But I appreciate you saying we need to do that. So thank you for, being vocal about it, and thank you for, Peter and his leadership and team for supporting all of this and standing by it and bringing it to our attention. It's so, so important, and I'm just grateful for everybody's honesty and transparency in this process. Sorry, I talked a lot.
You were on fire. Love it.
It will be really good and important for us to bring this discussion to the select board, who has, to give them benefit of the doubt. They have a lot of pressing issues that they're considering at all times on behalf of our entire town, right? And, we are the elected officials that represent the town focusing on schools. We have an opportunity and a responsibility to sort of help inform them about, the actual impacts, the implications, the consequences of these choices that they may not have time or wherewithal day to day, week to week, to actually even understand. And that's not actually their role, that's our role. So we get this chance to kind of bring that to them and help them connect with it, like you're saying, and I think thanks for sharing that piece about your impressions from the staff, right? Like, we all want to do right by our staff so that they can do right by our kids. I mean, that's the bottom line of this whole enterprise that we're all part of. Like, so helping members of the select board understand that too, that is that is like the opportunity / responsibility that we have.
And I think that's been
So-
one of the challenges of starting out this process with a big number and then focusing on the number and not being able to focus enough on on what is that number, who are the people, how does that impact students, what are we even talking about? And I think, I'm glad that we'll finally have that opportunity on Tuesday, because we've been talking about that for a month at least.
Here.
Yeah.
Right. And it's about return on investment, but it gets simplified to like being about the cost.
Yes.
But what it needs to really be is like a cost benefit analysis. Like, I was an English teacher, English major, but I had to take econ in grad school to get my doctorate. Like, I understand enough basics, you know what I mean? Like, we need to be able to talk about it in that context. It's not only what it's going to cost us, but it's what we're going to get from it, to your point. Or it's like the opportunity cost of not doing these things. When we have, some of the same people asking questions about, our rankings that are, thinking we shouldn't get any of these needs that have been identified. So it's really interconnected. But
I think it's also, and I just appreciate what you said, and Katie, even in our meeting today, when it boils down to, when you're talking about memberships or subscriptions to a program, I mean, when you're that granular, but you see, but it's also, I think it adds context, and I think to your point, the select board is responsible for a lot, right? And they're looking at it as many things as a number, and what's a number that can work with the town. And I think it is important to recognize like what this number represents from the standpoint of the people, of the programs, of the opportunity, of the growth, and the people impacted, because yes, then that equals a number, but we're starting with the number and then, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? And I think that it's just a backwards way to think about it. And I understand it's about a budget, but we are past the point of talking about it as a budget, and I think there just needs to be more context around it so that the importance is recognized. So.
thank you, Finance Subcommittee, and
that was our brief report.
Katie and Peter, for your work on all this. So, have some productive meetings, and I guess we should also say we are working on an updated FAQ document that will be shared with the community to provide some of this context. I think we heard, Katie, that was we heard such positive feedback from how you developed a version of an FAQ document for the warrant committee to support them at the beginning of our process, collaboratively working through the budget with them this year. And so I think it's great to kind of have a version of that type of a document that can be shared with the community, because as we see with our, people who come to public comment, people who stop, I'm sure all of us, like out and about in town, people want to understand, they want to be helpful to this process, and I think we can support them, and so they can support us by making sure they understand like the terms, the timelines, the implications of the various options that are before us. So that's in process, and we'll certainly share it to the community as soon as we're able to do that through communications from the district, and then also along with more information about the Monday 5 p.m. opportunity in person at the high school, with additional opportunities like that in that vein to follow. We just want to get started, to try to help build this awareness in the community so that we can, keep the momentum going. So, thanks.
So it's at the high school on Monday night?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where yet.
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
So yeah, we'll share that out as soon as we know. And if you do want to come to that, can you maybe follow up with me after this, just so that I alert Charlene to to post it rather? Not that we'll be in deliberations in that setting, but just to be on the safe side for our open meeting stuff. So great. Is that everything except for vendor warrant? Anything else for anybody?
It's everything except for vendor warrants. And I don't have the motion in front of me, so if anybody else would like to make, oh wait, here we go.
Yeah. It's 29 and 30, right?
Yes, so I now have them. I will make a motion to approve vendor warrant 29 in the amount of $196,466.85 payable on 1/30/2025, as well as vendor warrant 30, the amount of $131,465.74 payable on 2/6/25.
Second?
I had previously sent y'all vendor warrant 29. I just sent you vendor warrant 30. So apologies.
All in favor?
I'm sorry. Actually, sorry.
Got it in just in the nick of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So that was finance. So that just chair's report. Okay, district calendar. We've talked about this. We have a draft calendar in our folder that reflects the previous conversations that we've had. We are hoping to take a vote tonight. This draft that we have now reflects feedback from last time regarding the timing of half days, early releases. And I think I would like to just open up for discussion at this time as we hopefully move towards taking a vote on a calendar. So I know we've obviously had some public comments regarding the calendar, so of course we can respond to anything that we heard tonight, and whatever else is on our minds about this.
Can I just, separate from the holiday thing, the question on the cadence for the half days?
Yes.
Just to make that clear. Typically, we're talking about, it looks like the second Wednesday of the month. With the exception of November, I assume that was to spread out and not have 2 days in a row on that week of Veterans Day. And then, any thoughts on March 3rd? But that's not an early release, actually. So in the
Oh, is it? Sorry.
I think that might be.
It's
it's a PD day.
It's a whole day.
It's just
Yeah.
it's a lighter blue.
It's a
Oh,
slightly
yeah,
different
sorry.
color, yeah.
I should update that. My bad.
Oh yeah, the early dismissal.
Thank you again, Anna, for the graphic design. Pro bono graphic design.
It's just on the, yeah, on the right side, it's in orange.
Yes,
Okay,
sorry,
yes.
that's my bad.
It's supposed to be
It was
blue.
it was a last minute.
No, you're fine.
I was trying to just get it in right before the meeting.
You're fine. I just want to make sure which one was wrong. The blue, it's supposed to be blue.
It's supposed to be
early.
blue, sorry.
Okay. Any reason for that being, I don't know what March 3rd is. The reason for Tuesday?
That's the in-service day we have.
Yeah, so it should be orange, actually.
So it should be orange on the calendar itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a day
not blue.
off.
It's a day off, yeah.
Okay.
So our two full PD days are both Tuesdays. First Tuesday of November, first Tuesday of March.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the early release days are all scheduled for Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
was one that was
after, sorry. The after school, the
No, no, no.
19th parent-teacher conferences on March 19th, that is a normal school day.
Yes.
Just with conferences after the end of school, right?
Yeah.
I definitely do appreciate that revision, you know, since the last time. I think the ability to be more consistent will be helpful to people.
Yeah, one quick
but
question in terms of the 19th though, that's Eid. Does that affect sort of parents who can attend?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The March 19th?
Mm-hmm.
Is that contractual?
It's at least annually at that date. It's a carryover. I need to look and see if it's contractual. I don't believe it is on that specific date.
Yeah, so then that, we should avoid that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, they time the parent-teacher conferences after the report cards are distributed, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the 19th.
Like the week after?
Yeah, I don't know if the report card date is.
But that might be a reason it couldn't be earlier necessarily,
Correct.
but maybe it
Correct.
could be later.
Well, we could just decide to move it off of that date.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
we can find a new date.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
That's a great question. Thank you, Selena.
Mm-hmm.
Should June 19th highlighted in yellow, since it's a Juneteenth?
Well, the last day of
Last day of
school
school
is,
Is the
I guess that
15th.
would become relevant if we have
Snow days.
4 snow days according to this calendar.
Still call a snow day for tomorrow.
Then that would become a day off. Only in that event would that,
It would probably be good just to
Highlight it.
highlight it.
Done.
Oh, okay.
Other other comments? Sorry.
That's what you sound like. No, just that back here.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that I've said before, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this whole process. We've been at this for a very long time. I appreciate everyone here at the table. I've thought about through this experience. I don't know, anyway, it's challenging to say the least. I'm just going to say that, especially considering continued input, even since our last meeting. In particular, for me, I think we're all impacted by the learning about the impacts of our decisions, about whatever topics on our families or students. For me, I'm particularly sitting with the input from our clergy in the Milton, our members of the Interfaith Clergy Association in Milton, who have shared their input with us. That has, I'm going to personally share, just had a really big impact on me in terms of how I'm thinking about this decision, and I appreciate the work of going in, of this calendar, and I'm certainly plan to, of course, as we all always would, go along with the majority of the committee. And also, I'm personally not able to support this version of the calendar. Having had the opportunity to sit with and think about the request from individuals that I think through their positions I place trust in when I'm trying to understand the impacts of our decisions when it does come to the religious holidays and cultural holidays. And I don't find myself able to discount their perspectives. And so that's something I've thought a lot about in the past couple weeks, even since we had the opportunity to touch on it in policy, you know, which, and I don't know if Anna, you want to like provide any, I wouldn't say we didn't certainly come to any decisions in that discussion. We just had the chance to sort of continue processing a little bit, you know, where we were at, and I think we all have different perspectives on it. So I will just share that's really where I'm at. I don't find myself able to. I think that the scenario of 2 days, as imperfect as it is to me, is I'm like not wanting to let perfect be the enemy of the good in this dynamic, because there is no perfect solution. We've already come to understand that, and I think that you know, as I do understand the potential confusion of that scenario as proposed in terms of 2 days set aside each year for observing holidays with a day off. I think that solution does mindfully balance the impacts on student learning, you know, as in taking into account the inclusion factor of that has been discussed at length. So that's where I'm at. As even though it has potential to be confusing, like members of the Milton Interfaith Clergy are telling us that would not be confusing for them, that would be valuable for them, that would promote inclusion given the limitations we have around prioritizing student learning and not going too late into June for our school year. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie, for sharing that. I also have sort of sat with this again, and I don't want to belabor my points that I think I've already made time and time again. I do sort of was reflecting on the students and what we heard them say today, and thinking about, you know, sort of the progress, I think, and the statement that Milton made decades ago by recognizing a group that asked to be recognized in this way. And I feel like we're erasing progress. And while the sixth solution of recognizing at least, you know, having 2 floating days wasn't perfect, or it's not perfect. And yes, initially it may create confusion, but the reality is that most any policy or any, you know, it's usually confusing for folks, and it's about how you put it into practice and the information you do and all that you do to communicate and make sure that people understand and know what's happening. So I think there's a way to get around sort of that fear of confusion. And I also cannot support the calendar in the way that it's being presented today.
I have a question. So the scenario number 6, first, I don't think I recognized the extent of, my concern was originally that not all faiths were being represented in the 6th scenario. That was my original concern. I think my question about this is, when I think about the students who spoke, is does this scenario answer that question that they have, which is, so assuming they take off a religious holiday, and they were doing that, and they found that they were missing school. I'm wondering, like, with this sixth scenario as the floating days, how does that change that? Like, how does that address that very same issue?
No.
Because so we're saying that we recognize those 2 days, and this is a disagreement. I'm just trying to understand how that scenario is any different than what they just explained, which was they were taking 2 days, which they are entitled to take.
Yeah.
How does that change that?
I think that it changes, well, so first of all, to what the students shared. I mean, that is a piece of this that goes beyond the calendar.
Correct.
Whatever the calendar is, we can and will do better on having practices in place consistently that help students now and in the future not experience those negative experiences that those students were sharing with us regarding, tests, and things of that nature that are able to be planned around. So I think we've heard a commitment already that we will be able to work together as a district to do better with that, and it's a work in progress, as we even see just from flagging Eid, it's a constant work in progress with that. But I think whatever we need to get through the calendar piece, so then we can actually hear, maybe work with Dr. Shavers to understand what types of practices can we put in place. So, but you're right, adding 2 floating holidays actually won't directly address what those 2 students who were identifying themselves as Jewish students, who were talking about the experience of missing school or practice for both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Milton has never had both of those holidays off as days off. And that's not been on the table, so we wouldn't be directly addressing what they were sharing with the calendar per se, even with the 6th scenario. But I think what was shared about the 6th scenario from an interfaith group was that the goal there was to foster a communal sense of inclusion through a recognition that we do, even if it has to be on a rotating basis, where we only take a day off every couple of years for my community's holidays, or your community, whatever the community, of the 5 that we've identified at this point in time, which could be added to in the future. But anyway, I don't think it directly addresses it, but the point is, it was trying to find a middle path where it's not all or nothing.
And I appreciate that. I guess I'm not, I think I just want to make sure that there's a part that feels like there is the, almost like the adult scenario of the sense of what this is saying from the standpoint of inclusion, which I completely appreciate. And then there's the practical application from the students that we've heard that still say, I would be taking this day off that is not recognized as a holiday, and the implications of that. So I want to make sure that and I appreciate it doesn't have to be perfect, but does that address the issues of the students in any way? Will that do that, or is it more about the recognition? Does that make sense? I mean, it's just because those are the comments made by the students, and I just want to
I do think it's a little bit of both, right? It wouldn't address it for them every year,
right.
But at least there would be some years that it would address it. And it's not perfect. Now, combined with changing practices in the schools, so that there isn't an important test the next day, could help mitigate some of that. But I do think that conceptually, the proposal was that as a community of believers, we can all sort of make almost like the same sacrifice over time, right? This year, it's not my year, but I know that next year it will be. But there's still a value being placed here of saying, we believe in belonging, we believe in inclusivity. I think going back to this, it takes us back to a time that, we just kind of said, no, you know what, this is the way it is, and this is how the rest of the country does it, and we're going to continue to do that. But I think there was work that happened here in the town that got us to observe these, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and now we're going back. I think that's for me, that ultimately that's where I have a problem of going back, and do think that we had a potential solution that wasn't perfect, but it was sort of about being inclusive and recognizing the diversity that we have in the town.
I agree with you on going backwards, and I think that's a valid point. I still don't agree with the sixth scenario. I still feel like we're missing some key pieces of information, which is we don't know about the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and the Friday before Labor Day. Like, we don't have that information, and that could probably impact, and get us closer to a more perfect solution than a solution that's not perfect and could cause issues and confusion, just as we saw today with March 19th. So I think it creates a lot more problems, and I get it. Over time, you can get people to adapt, but the fact that it changes every year is not going to be easy. But if we were to have those pieces of information, and this was kind of my perspective from our policy, and we just had a general discussion on the topic, didn't come to anything, but my recommendation really was, can we wait till we get those two pieces of information on those 2 days and then expedite? So basically, just looking for an extension on the religious holidays. I'm fine with going back to the calendar that we started with, where those two holidays are still recognized, but then to add those additional days. And my goal, honestly, I do want to add those days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there's a way for us to work. But since we don't have that piece of information, I don't want to put a kind of an okay solution in there for now, just to get us through, because I think we'll run into other issues. And then I think simultaneously, what I'd like to see happen is a policy around adding additional holidays. Could we just, I think it was the Franklin example that listed all the holidays in the back. So if there are more that need to be added, I think we could include them and put an explanation of what those holidays are, because that's the other thing I would love to see, which I don't know where we are with it, is, how are we recognizing our students that celebrate these holidays, and how are we learning about that? We've been talking about that for a couple, I would say almost 2 years now, Lizzie, and I haven't seen anything. So I would like to see that.
Yeah, that's part of the initiative that I think we
Right.
need to
So I
do
would
now.
like to,
Yeah, for sure.
rather than just kind of we would like to see it, I would like a timeline for that, and when that we would like to see it. And right, because we've talked about it, but I think that's a huge part of this, and that's a huge part of recognizing cultures. And so, in addition to listing holidays, how are we making sure that, when we talk about being inclusive, how do our families, who might feel different in this community, feel included, right? Are they looked upon as hey, you're part of our community, we love having you, and not differently because they look different or whatever. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I've had my own experiences this year with my daughter at school, so that have been very challenging. So it's really important for me that those things get prioritized soon, because if she's experiencing, I know other kids have. Mm-hmm. So I think those are things that need to be recognized.
and prioritize, because that also goes hand in hand when we talk about being inclusive, right? And if we don't have that piece, it's just a day off that no one knows anything about, right? So what are we doing, and how are we recognizing our peers and making our students feel like they're part of this community? We can talk about it, but what are we doing in practice? You know, and I would like to really see the practice piece.
Can I ask you, you said like with the data or the information on those 2 extra days, right, the Wednesday and the day before, I assume that's around, like, again, the union negotiations, right, because right now those are within union contracts, and so obviously something we've talked about, talking to the unions about. So if, hypothetically, those were removed, were you saying that those were removed as obstacles in terms of not being able to have school on those days because of the union contracts? Am I understanding you right, that your ideal in that scenario would be that to then come back to the calendar and add these 2 days back and the 3 additional days we discussed to like add all 5 days to the calendar?
I mean, ideally, that's what I would like to see happen, because I think that was kind of where we started from, and I thought that was a good balance. I don't, you know, I mean, I don't want to get into the habit of, you know, a group comes in and they want a holiday and we're going to figure out how to add it. I think for us as a committee, it's our job to represent everyone in our town. So I think even if it's, I think when we look at it from that point of view, it's like we're being proactive about adding these holidays, and we've added it, and we've created a policy saying, here are all the holidays we've added. If you want more, potentially, we could list them and explain them. So it's not just, you know, no one knows what it is, but really what, you know, and look to and learn from what other districts have done in terms of explaining them, and continue and bring that to the classroom, and, you know, and create meaningful experiences for our students so that they're learning to accept one another, because at the end of the day, that's the goal here, right? To be inclusive. So, I mean, I agree with, you know, removing, you know, after hearing all the discussions, and I appreciate the passion that community members have brought to the importance of their holiday. So at this time, my recommendation would be to keep the calendar as is, as it was before we voted on it, was it what it was last year, and then get that piece of information from once union negotiations go through, and then expedite the approval of next year's, not this next year, upcoming school year, but the following year's calendar. Like, could we vote on it earlier in the year, like over the summer or September for the following year, so that we are, you know, making a pact to say, hey, our goal is to add these holidays, and we'll make sure we figure it out, you know. So just really just buying some time.
I think from our subcommittee meeting, we did talk about the 2 concerns, right? The first concern is what, Anna, you have mentioned about the contract. Mm-hmm. We cannot change the day that is already in the contracts right now. Right. So we cannot have that Friday before Labor Day or the Wednesday before Thanksgiving off, taken away and put school back in there. So at this point, for the coming year school's calendar, we had to keep it the way that the contract had written, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that we did mention in our subcommittee meeting is that I think we have the consensus understanding of how, whatever holiday we put on the calendar, we are excluding some people in the community. It is never going to be a equal way of representing inclusivity.
Right.
Right. And it's not what we have pledged allegiance to. I just have trouble like justifying having any holiday off is equity and justice for all. Like, how can you explain that? Like, how does that having the 2 days, like, next year we had these 2 days off, then another year after we had another 2 days off. How is it equity and justice for all? So that's why I think we should go with the revised calendar that we have in front of us, with no cultural holidays or religious holidays off. We recognize it in our calendar, and people can choose to take whatever days they wanted to observe. And that would be fair for everybody, because we can all choose the day that we wanted to take off. It could be more than 2 days, or maybe 3 days. We treat it the same way that excused absence would be. Like, we will get sick sometimes. Our kids get sick sometimes. When they're sick from school and they go back to school, it's our students' responsibility to catch up with the teacher, right? So we treat it the same way as an excused absence. And students observe whatever holiday and cultural belief they wanted to. And I think that is the most fair way for all the students.
All right, just clarification question similar to this. Like, if the 2 contract days weren't in the way of this, do you think, and I know they are, so this is hypothetical, but do you think, is that still like your position? Would you be more open to adding days if those were not? Or again, to the point you made, there's just no way to add enough days?
I also wanted to remind us of what some of the teachers' feedbacks have sent to us about, is that having a day in June, first of all, the weather is getting hotter and hotter nowadays, and our school does not necessarily have the expected ventilation cool enough for the student to feel focused. So extending the school year later in June is not going to help with the learning result, especially for students who take AP classes, because the AP exam is in first week of May. So adding those days in June does not help them have actual time to prepare for the AP exams. So I think like the fairest way is just that we try to condense our school year in this most comfortable month to make sure that our students and our teachers are having the comfortable environment to teach and to learn. I think that would be the ideal way of doing it.
So does the 6th scenario assume, if I'm understanding it right, it's saying it's the proposal that we made, but instead it's the calendar that we just recommended, but instead it's adding 2 floating holidays, correct? As opposed to
That next year would be Diwali and Eid, and the year after that, because Lunar New Year is on February vacation next year. This was what they had shared with us.
Right.
That next year, Diwali and Eid would be days off, which means October 20th and March 19th. And then the following year would be Yom Kippur and Good Friday. And that it would require every year that in the process of the calendar drafting, attention is paid to when the holidays are falling and whether they're on weekends, whether they're on other vacation weeks. So for sure, the premise of that scenario as presented to us is requiring like application of a commitment one year to the next that doesn't look the same from necessarily this year to next year, which is where it's reasonable to point out that could result in confusion. It would, as you said, Selena, it would require clear communication and rationale shared year over year. That's my understanding of it. But I think one other thing, I just want to name it for the record of our discussion so that it's raised, is that, and I don't think we need to respond to the questions that were posed to us in public comment. However, we haven't named in this discussion that our calendar does include Christmas Eve off as part of our winter break. And so we have had the discussions here that we're not adding days off, but that has been raised over the course of our debate, our deliberations. So I just want to make sure that's acknowledged, and I think that is a very common and traditional timing for winter break everywhere around here, and it is because of the traditions that we follow in this culture that we live in, which does, as has been raised for us, inherently sort of value Christian holidays. But just want to make sure that's at least acknowledged for the record. And I think at this point, I appreciate that. I think we've all had the opportunity. Mark, I don't know, you've asked clarifying questions. You haven't necessarily shared your thoughts. I think we should all have the chance to share whatever final thoughts we have. And then I do think we need to move to a vote on it. Because I can see, even as we're thoughtfully participating here, this is never going to be resolved. So I feel like in my work, oftentimes I'm working with groups and we're setting community norms, and one of them is to accept non-closure. I mean, it's hard because we have to come to a point of closure, even though this is a process that I can tell we all are struggling with on some level with finding closure, just because it's imperfect. But I do feel we need to do that. So I'm just time checking us to move toward being able to take a vote. Because there's not much else. I would like to try and get our friends out before it's too late. We do have a couple other things, and not to discount this, but no matter what we choose here, what we've already, I think, have a consensus is we will be, this is not like, oh great, solve that, never have to think about that again in Milton. No, we'll be thinking about this next year and going forward. Mark, do you want to add anything?
Sure, I can share my developing thoughts. First of all, we got great kids in this district. They're just really, again, well kind of said. I thought their comments were important. I have young kids. I've obviously been to high school. I work at a high school. I was there today. But just, again, being reminded of that perspective of the impact that these have, I think that's true. I don't think any of our scenarios that we're currently talking about address what they are talking about. So I again struggle with that a bit of how to support them, because I think those rigors are real and challenging, and I again want them to both celebrate their faith and feel the ability to be in the moment with their family and their community, and still be able to engage in rigorous coursework like APs and sports and things like that. So I think to your point, Amanda, none of these scenarios quite solve that. I think I've said pretty clearly, I just don't have the belief that a day off is in of itself this should be seen within our society and our town as this way of celebrating cultures. Because I think having folks together, learning together, that's the more important piece. At the same time, I acknowledge that that is my personal belief, and maybe that is not representative of the entire community, and maybe especially, speaking from a place of privilege as was raised by the public comment here. And so, that is real, and maybe I'm letting my own personal thoughts aside. I tend to agree with you, Anna, that, again, I'm torn between these 2 points, because I think you speak very well, and I worry about, are we ever going to be able to represent all groups, all cultures?
Never.
I think Lizzie spoke well, though, of an argument I've used before in other conversations, and others have, around not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, though. And I don't know if we'll ever get perfect, and I don't know if removing all culture recognition is also perfect. And then I think I'm generally with you that if we didn't have this sense of, because I want to be responsive to the community feedback we got, and the community says we do not want to extend our school year and can't do it longer. So I'm generally with you on if we had that ability. So I guess that is bringing me, and your point of like just reverting back, but that's bringing me kind of full round to say, well, I don't necessarily think the days off are what they should be if we just assume that's what we do within our society and our group and how we recognize cultures. Then potentially as a bridge, as we work through the contract negotiations, the sixth scenario is something I prefer above going back to the traditional. Because I think if we're saying we are willing to include these 2 cultural days within the calendar, then to me it's, okay, well, then we should use this as an opportunity to respect the wishes of the groups that have not had their culture seen, that their holidays recognized previously, over 30 years that these 2 other groups have. The group that the E group that came and originally kind of started all this and utilized this as an opportunity to kind of recognize them going into next year. And again, maybe that is our long-term plan. Maybe we negotiate contracts and realize we want to come back and add these things. I worry a bit that this is kicking the can down the road to us next year, and we spend a lot of time on this next year. But maybe that's worth doing, because I do agree that being able to kind of pull in all those cultural recognitions within the calendar, given the broad support across the Interfaith Clergy Association and what that could mean for those groups, would be worth doing. So that's a big shift. I apologize.
No, because I think, I think similarly, I think it's, I appreciate you for saying, I don't think anybody has thought this is an easy discussion by any stretch of the imagination, and appreciate the passion that people bring to it and the perspective. I said before, I'm concerned that scenario 6 will still bring up some of the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are going to be issues on any of these scenarios. And I wasn't here last year to know the conversation that came up, but the understanding of there wanting to be more inclusion and more recognition, and I think scenario 6 does more of that. I would say that, I guess the one thing I would ask with that is there a way to, in some way, reach out to the community, like after you've done that for a year, like how does that feel? Like, for lack of putting it another way, like if it was about people feeling represented and you're a year into it, and are we dealing with a lot of the same issues? That are people still not feeling represented? Are there still students? How are we addressing the student thing? Because I think part of it is it doesn't have to be a final decision in that sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can, to the same way we were talking about, like, does it look different with, I think it's a good point about the PD days, when we're starting. But I just also feel like this is there's a lot, there are a lot of questions I have about this scenario, and it would just be helpful, I think, if there was a way to have a survey, get a pulse, get some sense of what this felt like or how this worked for people the next year, so that we just weren't making the decision in a vacuum and move forward, and then people are like, wait, that didn't really address that, or all of these students' concerns are still there, because we can say that policy is going to change, but I feel like there probably was a policy in place for those students before to not be penalized, and that didn't work. So I don't want to assume that if we say that, then it will also be perfect. So, so like Mark, it's we are never going to please everybody. I take to heart what people have said, and I feel like scenario 6 does the most to show that we want to be inclusive and that we want to have people feel recognized, although it won't specifically recognize their holiday every year. So that's just my concern.
By definition, what we do here one year is never actually,
Right.
like, there's never 2 years with the same exact school committee necessarily. So every year it's a constant work in progress in that sense. But I appreciate what you just said. I just wanted to share one other thing that just was occurring to me, which, to your point, Mark, about the survey data regarding the end of school. One thing that I haven't focused on yet, really, but the thing about this 6 scenario is it still respects the wishes that the majority of our survey respondents gave, which was to not lengthen the school year.
Right.
It doesn't lengthen the school year. It keeps the same length of the school year that we have right now. You know, so that I think is maybe also something I find appealing about it.
Yeah.
It is trying to be in the middle, but it isn't perfect, as you've all, explained. So it sounds, just from the comments that we've just had, it actually sounds like maybe a motion. I'm just going to make a motion, and then we can discuss to make sure we can vote on it. But based on this discussion, I think I would like to make a motion to recommend a calendar, to approve a calendar that actually has a couple of changes from what we're looking at here, which is that it would be what we're looking at for next year. It would add Diwali, October 20th, and March 19th Eid as days off in the context of this scenario, with work to be done to explain and to consider this a bridge in the context of our negotiations being for the future around November, other days off. The after-school parent-teacher conferences would be scheduled at another day. I would like to make that motion.
A second. For a point of discussion, is this also something we can ask policy committee to work to just, I think, developing some type of written documentation around what this 6th scenario is, if it is not changed for next year, right? If it is carried forward, what are the holidays next year, potentially the year after? Like, I would assume we could lay out kind of create a proposal within that group for the next 5 years, from like the clarification, transparency standpoint of like, this is how the cadence will work as these groups look at how their holidays would be recognized within the sequence of kind of time. And explain it a little bit better, within written. If people ask, like, we can direct them to the document around like the reasoning behind this and the goal of it, and just try and document that both for the public and then also for any new school committee members who come in and say, like, what are you doing here? Why did we do this thing like we are doing from folks 30 years ago?
It would be, that would be a necessary sort of process towards applying this new calendar. Yeah.
So just to kind of clarify, so if there were potentially more holidays added, do you just put it into the rotation? Is that how it would work? Okay.
That we wouldn't have no more than 2 days off per year.
So just, can we play that out for a second? So then what becomes the determination? Do you know, and within this, are there ever, like, so say there's a 6th scenario,
I think
how does that begin to?
That's beyond the purview. Like I feel that's beyond the scope of this discussion. I feel
I'm
like.
just curious, just for
I
clarity,
think we
like how
can
that would
have-
work. So if you have a student who's 4 years in high school, so they might only be
That's
able
what
to
I'm-
celebrate their holiday once during that time,
Mm-hmm.
or potentially twice. So what happens, and how does that fit in with sports? Because we always talk about sports as well, right? Scheduling. So
Right.
have we had conversations with, you know, the athletics department and like town sports and all the volunteers that do that, Parks and Rec? Like, how does that fit in? Because I'm just curious, like if we are, because that, in order to make sure that policy is carried through, that it's not just written here and we wrote something, but it's not put into practice, we have to make sure that those, you know, stakeholders are also part of the discussion, because we need to make sure that we're completely being equitable, right? Like making sure, like, because we can probably make sure that a teacher does not schedule a test, but then what if there's a game?
Well, that's where we would look to the administration for procedures
Yeah.
that are put in place to make sure that all of that is happening on the ground. Because from a governance perspective, we set the policy. But then we would be asking for, you know, is that all of that, how is that being done? How are you making sure?
So, but wouldn't you want to know that piece of information before you set the policy, though? Because what if they come back and say, we can't do it? It's impossible. We don't have the field space, or the, you know, we have the Cunningham Collycott Gym. We have, you know, we've limited indoor facilities in our town and limited fields. So,
Yeah, but
you know,
isn't that an issue regardless?
right. So
Yeah.
there could be days when they would have to schedule it based, and, you know, because a lot of students have to rotate through. They can't just say, we're not going to have any sports this day because school committee set a policy.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think it is, I agree with Lizzie in that I think it's somewhat outside of the calendar piece, because I think if we're identifying, like, these are the holidays kind of within the calendar, the ones that we've listed on the right, whether or not they're days off or not, I think what we've talked about is on those days, there should be this general policy of excusing kids' days off, right? Not having tests on these days, not having large events like we just talked about with the parent-teacher conference, right? And so, like, whether or not there's, I think whether or not we have Good Friday off or Diwali or whatever it is, or none of those days off and go for every day, like that is a problem, or a policy that will need to be worked out, implemented, refined by the administration, to Selena's point, kind of in all those situations. I think the point you made earlier is like maybe scheduling a follow-up conversation after we get done with move the calendar forward to say, okay, now, and you've made this point too, now we've got the calendar, let's talk about the implementation of, like, how do we protect sports-wise? Can we bring in the athletic director and talk about the challenges of this, or how do we talk about this curriculum-wise, and let's bring in.
Yeah, I think those are important pieces to have to make sure that we can whatever policy we create, you know, can easily be carried out. You know.
Yeah, and it's not, I think that's just part of, that's like how we will support the implementation of this. And I think we all recognize we can't just flip a switch and like have this all be that way. It's about culture, it's about logistics. It's like two huge things that take a lot to shift. And it will not happen overnight, and it will be something that we're working, I hope, like in good faith as a district to really make progress on, so that next year we've made progress, probably not perfect, but you know, it's just part of the ongoing progress. And I think policy-wise, like Mark, I appreciate sometimes in policy we work through like procedures in addition to policies. This may be the kind of thing that should, if the majority of the school committee votes it, which we haven't done yet, but like if we were to do that, then we would probably look in policy to work through procedures, to work through policy, like relevant policy, if it was a policy level piece, and then, you know, work through it. But the calendar is our first step right now, you know, given where we're at in this process of needing to actually approve a calendar, honestly. And
So then I think Amanda's recommendation of making sure you collect feedback in the next year is so crucial, because you
Yeah.
have to make adjustments. I think in the past, looking in the past 3 years, like we did the late start days, we did this, we tried different things,
yeah.
and they didn't really work. And
Mhm.
I think at that point, like, we will get the feedback, you know,
Yeah.
in some form or other, and then we'll have to make adjustments. So I think that's going to be crucial, and figure out and have these discussions. And I'm glad the student reps are coming in, because they're also able to tell us their perspective and the hardships that they face when they have to, you know, and also get better about scheduling. So I think, I mean, I get in some instances we might not have the perfect solution, so I get it, and I don't think this is anywhere near perfect, honestly. But, you know, I guess it's worth a shot.
I think
I
it would
mean,
be
that's
good
what
to
I'm gonna
collect
say.
data no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Honestly, since we've uncovered through this process so much, I think that's important for us to do whatever we're gonna do, right? If we're changing anything, we wanna know how it impacts and make sure it's changing for the better for people. So I think, yeah.
I
we should
would
do
just
that.
caution folks not to, sort of for the committee next year, to not sort of do a survey of
A redo.
of a policy, or, you know, that really, in order for folks to, the community collectively experience it, you would have to give it a couple of years.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
right?
true. To make
Because
it,
if
to
you
get
asked
through
me
a
that
cycle.
year if I felt fully included, but it wasn't my holiday,
I might say no.
I might say no. So
You
then
might
there's
say,
already a
give me-
bias there,
give me
right?
4
So
years
you
and I'll
have
get
to
back to
give
you.
it a few years of implementation before you begin surveying folks. Now, you might want to do a survey around, did you know the holiday? Did you have enough information? Because then that just tells you that there might be more information that needs to be given,
Right.
so that there isn't
But I-
confusion. So I just think in terms of, I guess, be careful with what is asked, with something that's supposed to take a number of years before collectively the community experiences the impact.
But I think with this sixth scenario, it is absolutely crucial that you do the recognition in schools. It's so important, so
Yes,
that students feel they're not waiting till year 3
Yes,
to be
correct.
recognized.
To be seen.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that piece needs to be expedited, honestly. And
So
But
can
does
we
it-
work on that this spring?
Feel less certain.
So that we're ready for some positive
yeah,
changes around that next
because
year?
I think when you kind of roll this out, I think that would be really important for people to understand that, you know, it's not just, you know, we're just approving this calendar because we're already in February and we don't have a calendar for next year. But really, we're doing this in a way that's two-part,
Yeah.
right? We have this part, and at this moment, this feels the most inclusive way of doing it.
Mhm.
But this other part, so that, you know, we're not waiting 3 years to be seen.
So I'm just really, really struggling with it. Like we've talked a lot, and I think it's, you know, I'm playing it out. So we have the calendar. Part of this is like, if I'm a parent or a student and I get it, and obviously there's communication around it, but is there the need to say this then, like, projecting, like, okay, then this would be the calendar next year and the next year, so that people know that they're included. And you know, and I know that there's a timeline, but I feel like the more we're talking about it, like it's bringing up more questions for me with the sixth scenario. Like they're just like logistically and procedurally, and I know we can say that those things have to happen later, but I think that's where we get stuck. And this is a very new, it is a very new scenario, and I know I probably sound like I'm all over the place, but
And you also need an even number of holidays to add. Now we have 5, and we
Right.
would,
You
if
don't
we're
need-
alternating 2, what happens the
two.
3rd year? What's the
You just
holiday you
do
pick?
the 5th and the 1st,
Okay.
and then the 2nd, 3rd, and
Okay.
so, yeah. I mean,
So
just
they
get through
do
them quicker.
rotate. You will rotate them, so it's not going to be
I mean,
Diwali and Eid one year. It could be Diwali and Rosh Hashanah, or however.
I mean, I think it's something that I'd encourage I would look to the policy committee to put something together that, again, explains that, not just for us, but for the town, that I think you could go ahead and map it out based upon, I mean.
We could
these-
draft calendars 2 years in advance, like some
Right,
districts
that's
do
what-
that.
Yeah, I would
Some
even just say,
districts
like-
have
Glenn
like
had suggested
tentative
that maybe we could vote
school
on
year
it for
26,
3 years.
27 calendar that they would be approving now.
Yeah, or even just on the back of this calendar is essentially a write-up of this is how we think about representing holidays within this scenario. These are the
Yeah.
5 holidays. This is for the next 5 years. Here's how they will fall. I think those are things that can and should be included. I think the other thing is you mentioned with like reverting back to the original scenario is that I could see a scenario in which the school committee brings this up again next year because the negotiations, right, those groups are amenable to removing those days, and then that opens up other doors, which again has been shared before, is like those doors right now are closed. We're not sure if they will open. If they open, then those are different possibilities and different conversations.
But we could also put calendar for the next 3 years and make sure that all 5 days are recognized, and so that people know that, hey, my holiday is not on this calendar this year, but it is next year, and so on and so forth, and just vote on it so that.
We could do that within
And
the
then-
next,
and
we could
then-
do that like before April,
And then,
we
yeah,
wanted to.
and then that way we can wait, to your point, collect feedback in 3 years, right? Like, how did this process go? But here's our calendar for the next 3 years.
So, okay. We made and seconded a motion a while ago. I guess what I would like to know, can we vote on that motion?
Remind me of the motion again?
Mo-
That we are going to do the 2-day rotation?
Well, the motion is just for the calendar as you see, with adding Diwali and Eid as days off.
For Nick.
Not, sorry, these don't have any holidays right now, so adding the 2 that we had previously, and then adding.
No, not the 2 previously, just
Oh,
adding
sorry, yes,
Diwali
you're right,
and
the
Eid.
2 days, yep.
For next year.
Yes, sorry,
And-
I'm already confused.
Yep. And so that's,
I'm a very visual person. I have very hard time to imagine what it would look like from year to year from now on. Like with the 2 floating holiday thing, it just
So-
very confusing.
it would make the last day of school would be
17th.
the 17th.
For next year.
Yes.
So the other thing too is like we would have to, depending on when those holidays fall every year, we will have to make sure that we're still staggering those
Yep.
half days and PD days, because what I would like to see less of is, not full weeks of school, because I think that's going to be really challenging. And maybe, I don't know, maybe some months might have to have 2 PD days if the holiday, depending on when the holidays fall.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, that's in the context of, here, March 3rd is the last PD time for the district. All the early releases and PD days are completed by March 3rd because it makes sense from a curriculum instruction standpoint to front load that time in the first half, 2/3 of the year, so it can be beneficial in the year. So that's also a part of it. You're going to have more interruptions early, in the first half of the year. So that's, look, I think there's more we can do, clearly, to move ahead. I think we should take a vote. If we have a tie, we have a tie, then we'll have to figure out what we're going to do.
Not sure what
But
the tie does.
Are people comfortable with that? Recognizing that another one of my community agreements is finding comfort with discomfort. So there's that too. Easier said than done. All right. And last words?
Yeah, last question, and this probably points to where my brain is. I'm just going to ask it. This has to be voted on tonight. This has to be decided tonight.
Update the colors real quick, and everyone will project it. You want to see?
I mean,
I don't know how easy it is to
Wait,
move the
what are
last
the-
day
what
and
are
add the
the-
2 days.
It doesn't.
I don't think you need
to
to update it on
I
the
mean,
right.
People
It
are
is-
waiting on it, so like
Yep.
historically, we're late right now. I think normally it's January that we've done this. So
Yeah, we are late, but we're always late. That's why it's always.
I think my question, it's back to the idea that we could keep talking about this every meeting for the rest of the year, because it's just that hard. There is no, it's not like we're going to land upon a perfect solution that we haven't found yet. Whatever we end up choosing to do is going to be imperfect. It's going to be upsetting to some people. And we just are going to have to do our best to make it, to implement it in the best possible way. So
Anna was being a whiz and just for visuals was just trying to update the actual picture, and then
I just, at this point, I know it's getting late, and the things we have left to do hopefully are pretty straightforward and not super time consuming.
Sorry, guys.
Knowing that we have so much on our plates still with the budget for the next couple meetings, I just feel like if we can
So what was
achieve a consensus of some kind tonight, I think that's kind of important to be able to do.
I'm sorry.
Still need to discuss
In
t-shirts.
design, I know. All right.
I appreciate having the visual. I still cannot convince myself that this is fair. If Chinese New Year is so important to me, I will take my kids out of school, regardless of what. But I never did. I cry because it means a lot. But to be honest with you, whether or not Lunar New Year is recognized on the calendar off, we have adopted different ways of celebrating this day. We don't have to take our kids out from school on that day. Instead, we bring the celebration into the school. I think the marginalized group will always be marginalized. With the 5 days that we have on the calendar conversation right now, there are still going to be a lot of marginalized groups who are not represented in the schedule. How are we going to be justifying that? Is justice for everyone. So I just cannot convince myself agreeing on any calendar that using the name of equity and inclusion. But as a tool, is actually, when you look at it in another way, it is not equity and inclusion for everyone. When you think about everyone, anything that we recognize on the calendar, it is excluding someone. So instead of having us make the decision of what should be included in the calendar. Let the people choose what they care about and take those days off. Especially at this time that we do not have a contract for the future years. We don't know what the teachers want. We have to accommodate what the teachers want, because without the teachers, our students are not learning, right? If we do not have enough teachers in the school running the show, even our students show up, there's no result coming out from it. So we still have to please what the teachers really want. And without the contract, the renewal contract, all those new things that we're trying to add into the future years, it doesn't make sense. So instead of having these 2 floating days, I would suggest us to go with what we have in front of us, the final version, with no days off, with whatever the contract has told us to do, collect data in the future year, and then look at it, those data again. If, as I said, if this day is very important to me, I'm going to take my kids out of school anyway. But if I can find an alternative way to celebrate it, I will do it, because education comes first. So I think we should go with this new, the finalized version that you have in front of us, instead of putting back the 2 floating days. Let's have the contract finalized. Let's collect the data from next year on how many percent of our student body and staff and teachers are going to be out on these different kinds of holidays. Perhaps these holidays are not the most common times off among our students and staff and student body. Perhaps it's something else instead. It could be this one day right before the end of school that just hanging there. Or maybe there is this Friday right after the winter break. So I think we should just collect the data from a fresh level ground and then propose any changes or suggestions on holiday observations. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Bao. And I think clearly it's just very heartfelt. Thank you for sharing your own family's experience. And we all recognize that no 2 families are the same. We're all sitting here with different perspectives. I hope I've conveyed appreciation. I don't think I ever could fully, not for nothing, but we've been grappling with this very difficult topic that is emotional, that is personal. We've been experiencing a lot of personal outreach, emotional outreach. We're sitting at this conversation respectfully, I think listening and trying to do our best, even with some different perspectives and ideas, and I just appreciate your vulnerability with sharing that. I think what we should do is we have a motion on the table. We should vote on that. Depending on the outcome of that, we can make another motion. We need to get to a place where we have 4, 5, or 6 people in favor of something in order to be able to move forward. And it's painful. I really, I know that. So let's just see what we can do so that we're able to move forward and this isn't the end of it. Thank you for your patience. You've just had to sit here this whole time. I'm really, thank you for that. Can we take a vote on the motion that we have? With which Anna, you reflected actually here, and Val, you made you were sort of moving toward proposing an alternative motion.
Yes.
So depending on the outcome of this vote here, we'll see about that, okay? So, all in favor of this calendar that we're looking at here, which reflects adding 2 days off, which are floating days on a rotational basis, with work to be done to flesh out that procedure for our district going forward. All in favor of this scenario? Okay. All opposed?
And
Okay.
I'm going to say that, Val, you made a very strong case for those marginalized groups, right? Like, I celebrate several holidays in here that are not even listed on the side. So I do. I remember in the survey we had a Syrian New Year, which is important. There might be a few people that celebrate that in our community. And so we're never going to be inclusive. So to your point, making an argument on the sake of being inclusive this isn't it. So so I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
So that motion fails. So would someone like to make another motion to see if we reach a different outcome? I think the other motion, Bao, it sounds like you're ready to make that motion, which is to revert back to the draft we started this evening with.
Yes, I want to make a motion to approve the 2025-26 school calendar that's presented to us in the folder with no holidays off for the next school year, so that we can collect data from the community, from our students and teachers, to make sound decisions in the future school calendar.
I just would note that Christmas Eve remains here.
Mm-hmm.
Could I make well, maybe we have to wait for that, but that would be my question, is could it even be a half day or something Christmas Eve, or is that a must day off?
No.
In the sense of, I do think it's, and I think that came up at the last meeting, that there are people who, celebrate Christmas Eve and those who aren't, or is it the feeling that there would just be nobody at school?
That would be my feeling. I mean, I'd want more data on, I'd worry about staffing ratios and the number of students. I think, like, to me, that's another piece we've talked about previously, is again, like, you don't want to schedule a day of school that people can't show up to, for whatever reason that might be, culturally speaking, within our community. If you have the majority of kids not show up, and I don't know, we have no, similar to the other things, and to Val's point on like Good Friday, we have no data actually on how many people this impacts, which is kind of why we did the survey, because that was one of my concerns about removing Good Friday and the Jewish holiday as well. Just like what is the impact on our staffing, and a point that's been brought up by members of the Milton Interfaith Clergy Association at different points as well. For those 2 days, I think that my perspective would be that increased on, and so I worry about us putting in the district in that position, and also doing that without talking to staff.
So just a point of order, you made the motion. I don't think it was seconded yet.
Second.
Okay, Amanda seconds. Is there any further discussion of it? I think that's probably likely. I think that's what we're naming, is this is not the people around this table that only are participating in the privileging of Christmas Eve. It is something that I think we would really run a risk of not being able to staff buildings for that day, and I think that would require further exploration and thought to make that as a step. Maybe if this is the direction we're moving, then that's part of the process that follows from here, where we continue to understand what's possible and what makes sense. But the motion's made and seconded. Can we vote on it? Any final comments? This is our, we're a 6-person board. I think we could use a 7th person, just. But everyone okay? All right, so all in favor?
I'm really struggling with this one. I'm struggling on both, sorry.
Just want to finish the vote.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
You're fine. I don't know procedurally if we need to finish the vote or we
Sorry.
can talk before.
So that, all in favor was 2.
Mm-hmm.
Opposed?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why school committees have odd numbers.
Or long meetings. So I would also feel, to Bal's earlier point, we are leaving someone out, and I feel like the calendar as we see it or saw it earlier today and even later today does not recognize all the holidays celebrated by students in our district, and I think that's what's missing for me. It recognizes major holidays, but I think if we're truly being inclusive, right, those need to be listed. And I don't know if that data can be collected quickly, because I think that would be important. I know some of it was mentioned in the surveys, but I don't know.
You're talking about listing them on the side?
Yeah,
like having
somehow to make it feel more representative of our school community.
I think we can continue, like that, those are,
Yeah.
I think those are sort of
That's-
like housekeeping level edits that can continue to be layered on.
like moving the after school.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's all part of like how we go forward. I think that our task here essentially is really just to decide when is the district in session, when do we have school, when do we not have school. Like, so those, because I mean, we also don't have the Franklin style appendix yet here, which I think we've broadly agreed is like something we would like to include, which could, yeah, to your point, reflect additional ones that aren't here yet, but also with that extra information that's educational,
Yeah,
shares.
I think that would be
So
important to put
we'll
out
do
there.
that, but those are, I think those are pieces that happen after we've approved the actual first and last day of school, with like what are days off in between for the purpose of scheduling PD, planning, etc. So I am a little bit flummoxed with it. Like, I'm worried we're at an impasse because we just voted 4-2 against that motion, but we didn't have a majority for the previous motion. And this is stretching my chair
Sorry. It's me complicating it.
skill set, so
No.
not sure what to do. Other than have to move it, have to table it, I don't know what else to do. But I don't know what other information people are needing.
I don't think any of the information that even tabling it will get us.
Yeah.
We won't be able to collect the data that we
No,
need to make
no,
an
we
informed
won't.
decision on this at this point. I think that's kind of the challenge. So I guess we could go with a temporary solution, but I don't think we could necessarily phrase it around being inclusive. I think it's just accommodating the holidays that, recognizing some major holidays in here.
So is that kind of returning to the previous motion?
I think, yeah, I would say,
Okay.
yeah, with those 2 days.
All right, so then I think we need to
Vote.
we need to re-vote.
I'll make a motion to approve the SY26 calendar with the edits of adding in Diwali as a day off and adding in Eid al-Fitr as a day off and procedural edit of moving the March 19th conference, after-school conferences, and subsequently moving the last day of school to June 17th.
And doing all the follow-up we've discussed. Okay.
Yes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
It's on this.
Okay. All opposed? Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. Deep respect for each of you, just want to say. And we'll keep going. So, policy subcommittee. Oh, geez.
I think we just talked about it for like the last hour and a half. So I think outside of the calendar discussion, we have the Title IX policies that have been put into our folders. I think I think we need to do an expedite vote on the previous version before the voting we did back in August. So it's really, so we didn't really discuss it. I think there's language in there that, sorry, I need to find it.
Yeah, policy AC, ACR,
Yes.
ACAB.
Yep.
Can you all clarify just what specifically was changed within? I didn't see.
I don't see a redlined
Yeah, I didn't see.
version, which makes it hard to even get to a vote tonight for myself.
Oh, they were going to put a red line
because
version,
there isn't
right?
one.
Yeah.
That's what I was, yeah.
This is a reversion back to the previous.
Yeah, it's a reversion to the
That's why it's
previous
not a
version.
But I would still love to see what
Yeah, what's
that
the-
means.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I
maybe we can try to find that. I think just
I'm just wondering.
the
is
general
it-
framing,
Do we have to take a vote on this today?
we do,
Why?
because there are Title IX. Well, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, we've now, we've gotten word from the federal government that they have reverted the Title IX regs back to 2020 or whatever the date was.
Right.
So we want to be aligned with that, with our policy.
Correct, but I think we did hear tonight, and I thought it was a compelling statement, that there's a lot of stuff coming down, right? All these orders. But the reality is that how quickly we react to it is also an important balance. And while I do think it's important for us to be aligned, I would like to see exactly what those changes are. And then I'm also curious, what other things are we doing to protect our students who are vulnerable, given the changes that have come down, but not seeing that here. So I just don't feel equipped to do it today.
So one point of clarification, this isn't an executive order, actually. It's a court order. So that's a little extra, like, framing that should be provided. We got the guidance from our legal counsel. It was from January 10th. And it's a federal court vacating the changes to Title IX regulations that the Biden administration had put into place that then were challenged and removed prior to the new administration taking office. So just to not conflate, because I do think that what was raised in public comment is important, and especially as it pertains to transgender student athletes, like that is something that we will have to work through. my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, because if we don't have to vote on this tonight, I do think given the time, given the, the need for the red line, we would ideally be able to postpone this, all things being equal, but my understanding was that there are some current investigations underway that require our policies to be aligned with the most up-to-date legal references.
That's
So
accurate, yeah.
it was that wanting to avoid exposing ourselves by proceeding in investigations that with out-of-date language in our policies.
Yeah. Wouldn't,
The law
That
would
was-
supersede.
that
yeah,
was
wouldn't the
all-
law
The law
supersede
supersedes the policy.
if it needs to? Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
So-
So maybe it's, so that's why I'm wondering, is it, I mean, this is just what Dr. Pavlicek, how he kind of represented it to us in the conversation, so I know it's challenging because you weren't there and he's not here now.
Yeah, I find it hard to vote on. I just have no idea what I'm voting on, and it doesn't feel great. And again, Title IX is not like just kind of a superfluous little thing. It's very important, protects a lot of really important groups. And so, again, I totally understand kind of agreeing with following what we are required to do by law, but I think the district can do that superseding policy. We can't create a policy that forced them to do something illegal anyways. And so I would love, to Selena's point, the opportunity to see what the changes are and discuss it a bit more to make that clear for us and to make it clear for the members of our community who are, most impacted by this too.
We
Is
can do
that
that.
okay with you?
Yep, yep.
All right, so we'll do that then. We'll make sure that we get more precise red line versions.
Thank you.
And bring that back next time. I don't think there was anything else under policy for tonight, right?
No.
Okay, so we can quickly move through these other pieces. Facilities is next though, so I'll stick with you.
So facilities was pretty, was actually our quickest meeting ever that we had for facilities. We just got an update from our facilities director, Tom McCarthy. He talked about just kind of hold on 1 second, sorry. 14 windows open. So he talked about just a few housekeeping things. Boiler at Cunningham and Collycott lost a rib. They had to. They were able to put in a claim and was able to get reimbursed for like $18,000, which was great. So they can get it repaired. So no big issues in terms of the cold weather. And like they had like really good. I think. This, in terms of like they've had like custodial staff and so on and so forth have really done a really good job with the snow this winter. They had some college students who came in and painted the school's boiler room floors like over break, which was kind of neat. I was like, that's awesome. He was able to get some seasonal help. They're trying to continue to try and repair the inverter at Cunningham Collycott. That was one. We had talked about the outdoor learning spaces, but we haven't been able to make any progress just because it's been so cold. So that's something that's going to hopefully, Matt Morong, one of our members who was nice enough to volunteer to lead that up, he's hoping to in the next couple months just, be able to revisit that and provide more of an update. And then I did share with them the update on the Cunningham 3rd and 4th floor, which is also part of the capital committee's report, but it was unanimously passed through capital and also through a warrant committee a couple weeks ago, and we have had full support to get that push through. So I think in the interim, with all the other things that we're dealing with, it was great to get the support to get some help with the space at those two schools. So, and hopefully, I think we're going to try and stagger it so that if we can kind of time it to start. So it will be part of February town meeting. It's on the warrant. So hopefully it'll get green lighted and we can begin the work so that the third floor will be ready for the September of the following year, so of 2025. I mean, of this year, and then next year it'll be the fourth floor. So that was it. It was a very quick meeting.
When does the fourth floor work start? When would that start?
Next year, but we would order all the equipment. That's what was the big thing with the lead time on the equipment.
It'll start this summer.
Yes, but the third floor would start this summer.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
So hopefully by September, there's some logistical things that were brought up, like Camp Cunningham and so on and so forth, but Peter said he'll take care of all that, so.
We'll figure it out. We got
This
it.
wizard
We
wand.
got it. We got it.
Yes.
Good.
But yeah, so hopefully by September, would have, and there was some discussion about the library, what happens to that, could kind of exist throughout the building. It could be in one classroom and so on and so forth, just to kind of get us through that next year and then go into them. So that's good.
That's great.
Yeah, that's the main highlight of the capital report. Is that a support from capital to move that request forward to town meeting, February 24th, 25th. So hopefully that will pass, but it's really good to have their support along with the warrant committee. And over the next few weeks, capital will be continuing to hear more about and vote on FY26 capital requests as we move towards the warrant for the May town meeting. So that's all I have for that update. And then that just leaves evaluation subcommittee. So we did meet. I belatedly put, it had been in the, I think the evaluation subcommittee folder, but I put it in the folder for this meeting, and it's really just FYI at this point. We met, Anna, Mark, and I, with Peter to kind of look over the timeline for the evaluation process going forward from here, and we have a good plan. So we put some dates together here. I think you can just, look over that at your leisure, and we can circle back to it. But essentially, what we can anticipate is that it will be, that should be February 2nd. We would, look at March 2nd. Sorry. March 5th. That's the next time we're going to talk about this. March 5th, we're going to look more in detail at the timeline, the rubric, the process, and get prepared. And then it will be March 14th. We receive evidence from Peter. And from there, it will unfold pretty quickly so that we can complete a thorough and thoughtful evaluation process by April. I would suggest at this point, why don't we just hold questions? You can look through this and we can bring it up at a future meeting to make sure that these dates will all work for people. Bao, I know you have a spring break. I don't know if you're that last year that impacted timing for you.
March 5th, I'm here.
Okay, so.
March 19th is when.
Yeah, March 19th.
I'm here.
You're here, so we
April
have a meeting.
16th.
That's a meeting where we will have received the evidence and we will have the chance with Peter to ask him questions just to make sure we have full understanding of what's been presented there. So, everyone okay on that for right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we don't have minutes to approve tonight. I think we can just, next meeting, we have our budget. We have Title IX, and we'll see what else we have. But anything else?
Nope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It is before 11.
I want to know what Regina's bet was. She's really, usually really good at knowing.
I'm sorry, but yes, but you know what? Thank you for all this great discussion. I feel like on a number of really important, very different things tonight, we had really good and important discussion. We'll be together over the next week. You can follow up with me individually, again, about Monday, 5 p.m., Tuesday, 7 p.m. with the select board. That has been posted, so.
Where is the select board meeting on Tuesday?
It's at the Council on Aging. Yeah. And we'll get more information as I get more information, I'll share that with you, but my expectation is we are the main agenda item. It should be early in the meeting. And
I do have a question about that meeting. What is kind of the strategy of going and presenting there? Like, what is, like, I know we talked about some of the areas, and I apologize for bringing this up now, just thinking, we talked about, like, you know, closing the gap, right? Like that 2.3 or whatever it is, but like what is kind of our plan to getting closer to that for, you know, to kind of justify if it's a level service budget or whatever number that they recommended or what was kind of proposed out there, like what is our strategy? Because I mean, it's, you know, like, because if we're all working towards the same goal and we're helpful, then I guess it makes sense, but we haven't really discussed what the approach is, or we just kind of, kind of like we're just jumping at the comments, like how.
You're right. It's kind of coming together here quickly at the end before this, like right before this timing of this meeting. I think Monday morning, finance. Mm-hmm. The topic is this FY26. So I would say for those of us.
Is that a cross-posted meeting for all of us?
Has that meeting been posted already? Because I was wondering if we could just post it as a...
School committee cross-posted?
Mm-hmm.
We can.
It's not too late.
Because we haven't had that opportunity to talk.
I'm just wondering, because like there are going to be a lot of questions and there's no,
I think
like there's no
too late.
strategy to post.
So it'd have to be 8 a.m. because it's Monday at 8 a.m. So it'd have to be tomorrow at 8 a.m. posted, which it won't be.
Like I would hate to go in there and just kind of not make a strong case for it, or, you know, and are we all aligned on what the case is that we're making? You know, is it level service? Is it needs-based? Is it, you know, what do we really need? And, you know, what is that number that will not put us in the situation next year where we need another override? Mm-hmm. You know, like we haven't had that discussion. So, and I would love, you know, basically, like I would love Katie's kind of guidance on that so that we're all aligned on what we're asking for.
It's all very fair. I don't know how we
like
know.
I would hate, because I just, you know, we're going in front of a committee that's going to have, there's going to be a lot of feedback, right? Like there's going to be a lot of scrutiny, there's going to be a lot of things. So are we prepared to go in there? Because I don't feel prepared. I'm happy to pretend I am, but I'm not.
Fake it till you make it.
Well, and I do think this is where our finance subcommittee, you know, they are coming into it with the most knowledge sort of built into the way you're totally right. It like better would have been to have one more week to have that like fuller opportunity. We just don't have that. So I think in terms of what we could do, I mean, what do you think makes the most sense? I think finance is meeting Monday morning. Mm-hmm. I would say anybody who can who is in, you know, can attend that meeting. I would say we need to probably get an update following that meeting that shares sort of the finance subcommittees, like where you all come out with that. And that is going to be important for guiding us, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the plan
the
for
two of you.
for
Yeah.
Monday morning, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the presentation, the conversation with select board is not much different than we've had around like what is our level service amount, what is our needs. It's a matter of we've had no conversation with them, and so I think it's a matter of walking through a lot of the things that we've done. We've shared previously with this group, right? We talked a bit about today even, but the prior budget presentations that Katie and Peter have done, I think my understanding is they are working to refine those and they will be having like the presentation to select board. We will be there to support and to add color and context and things like that. But it's mostly getting the select board to understand where our level service number comes from, and also to try and to the point thing you were doing so well earlier around trying to convince around that level service isn't not like here are our needs and why these are our needs and why they should be considered within this context of an override. Because I don't, to the point you're making, I don't think right now they are. I think the conversation is being forced towards a not even level service, but potentially more of a budget cut conversation. And so we want to make sure the town is clear, the select board, I should say, is clear on the impacts of that, which is a lot of what the color they're adding of like, hey, this is what it means to lose what you're talking about. And for us on our end to say, this is why we're advocating for both level service, but also needs funding because of what our kids deserve and what we need to do to invest in our schools.
Okay.
So if you want to write down a lot of things you said today, I think bringing that would be great. Otherwise,
I
I'll
already
take
forgot it.
I'll take some clips.
Just rewatch the meeting.
Yeah.
Rewatch it. Okay. All right. Okay. That works.
Thanks. All right. So.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second, all in favor?
I thought you weren't going to raise your hand.
Thank you.
I was like, some more?